Okay, let the record reflect that everyone's returned to the room from lunch. It's 12:55 p.m. Mr. Milliken, I understand you're calling Christy Gammon as your next witness. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Ms. Gammon, would you raise your right hand, please? Swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Would you state your full name, please?
Christy Faye Gammon,
And your address?
312 West 11th Avenue.
Thank you. You can put your hand down. Mr. Milliken?
Christy, how long have you lived at that residence that you said there, roughly?
About a year.
Okay, who do you live there with?
My parents, my mother and father.
Okay. You know why you're here today?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall getting arrested out there at all?
No, sir.
Okay. What's your, after being arrested, what's your first memory?
I was strapped to a chair in the Warren County Regional Jail.
Okay. Have you been in jail since that time? Or did you get out and are you
got
back?
out.
And you're back in now? Okay.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask you to, did you have any injuries?
Yes, sir.
And I want you to tell the commission what your injuries were.
Yes, sir. I had black eyes and my ears were sore for about 6 weeks right here. And I had migraines for about a month. They came from my ears up my head.
Okay. Had you been in a fight with anybody that you remember that day?
Not that I know of. I don't think so.
Okay. Had you had migraines before this incident?
No, I rarely ever get a headache. If I do, it's a migraine, but it's rarely ever. I never get a headache.
And how long was that pain you said in your ears that you were describing?
6 weeks.
How long were your eyes black? Do you know?
About a week and a half.
Okay. So the first thing you remember, you were strapped in the chair in the restraint chair at the jail.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you ever had any altercation or reason to have anything to do with Sergeant K before this incident that you know?
No, sir.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson?
Ms. Gammon, are you hepatitis C positive?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did the day that this happened, you had been at Soup's, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you'd also been into some kind of a fight with your boyfriend.
Not that I remember.
So you're saying you don't remember?
I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember your father throwing you off the front porch that day?
No, sir.
Had you been into it with your father?
No, sir. Not that I remember.
Okay. Is it safe to say you don't remember a lot of that day?
Yes, sir.
The part you do remember, though, is that you had been down at Soup's house, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Soup is Terry Campbell?
Yes, sir.
And he had a gallon of vodka, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And y'all drank that vodka.
Yes, sir.
And then after that, you walked down to where you were employed at Shake Rag Restaurant, is that right?
I didn't walk. I got a ride, but yes, sir.
Who drove you down there?
My friend AJ.
Okay. And when you got there, you were trying to go get your check, is that right? Get paid?
Yes, sir.
For work.
Yes, sir.
But Mr. Reed wouldn't pay you.
Yes, sir.
And so after having you and Mr. Campbell having drank this gallon of vodka, you smoked a couple of synthetic marijuana joints. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Is there a slang term for that?
Probo.
Probo? Is that probation weed? Is that what that is? It
Yes.
P-R-O-B-O or V-O?
B-O.
So it's Probo, and that stands for probation weed.
Yes, sir.
Because at one point people thought even if they were on probation or in drug court, they could smoke that and would not be detected by testing. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that particular synthetic marijuana or Probo made you wild that day, didn't it?
I guess. I don't remember anything after that.
You've been put in the chair at the jail before, right?
No, sir.
You had never been in the jail before?
Oh, in jail? Yeah.
And
Yes, sir.
you've been in jail a bunch.
Yes, sir.
You were described by one of the deputy jailers as a frequent flyer at the jail.
I object to the relevance, Your Honor.
We understand she's been in jail.
Okay. And are you testifying that you had never been put in the restraint chair?
Never before, no.
Okay. So if somebody testified differently about that, they would just be making that up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You did not file any kind of complaint with the police department, did you? Or
No,
the city?
sir.
Okay. In fact, when Major Bowles came to see you, you asked, one of the questions you asked her was, how'd y'all find out about this, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You also told her the reason you think you lost your memory was because of the synthetic marijuana. Is that right?
No, sir.
Well, I'm looking at the report that was written, a summary of your testimony or your statement. Gammon thought the synthetic marijuana may be the reason she lost her memory. Is that what you told Major Bowles, or did you tell her something different?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I might have said it.
You told
I
her
don't
you'd been...
remember.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I might have said it.
Okay. And you told her you'd been smoking Probo for 4 years,
Yes, sir.
but you'd never lost your memory before.
No, sir.
But you were drinking on this gallon of vodka and smoking synthetic marijuana.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember being at the jail and the medical staff looking at you and having pictures taken?
No, sir.
Okay. Is that a picture of you at the jail?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that picture being taken?
No, sir.
Do you remember referring to Sergeant K as a nigger bitch?
No, sir.
Wouldn't surprise you, though, if you'd said that, would it?
Being drunk? No.
Okay. And do you remember telling her that you thought this was all some racially motivated situation?
No, sir. I don't remember.
Do you remember apologizing to her at the jail?
No, sir.
So you won't deny that you apologized to her?
I don't deny it, no.
Did you go to the doctor about your black eyes?
No, sir, but I went, my back was hurting. I had pain shooting from my back down my leg, and I did go to the nurse at the jail. That was after the black eyes had went away.
Okay. How long did you stay in jail after you got arrested that night?
6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks.
Then you got out on bond?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then you were actually under indictment for something else when this happened, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you're currently serving a felony conviction sentence, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And what's that for?
Objection to the relevance.
I don't know that it makes any difference to us. Beg pardon? He's indicating that you can go ahead and enter that evidence.
What are you serving a sentence for?
Contraband.
Uh,
Promoting contraband.
Sneaking drugs into the jail?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how long is your sentence for that?
2 years.
But you have not been indicted on the assault that you committed on
No, sir.
Sergeant K, right?
No, sir.
Did you talk to Mr. Milliken in the last week or so about this, your testimony?
That's me.
Yes, sir, I did.
How many times did you talk to him?
Once
When was that?
at the courthouse when I had court.
Okay. And then in the last day or two, your attorney, Mr. Rohr, contacted you
Yes, sir.
about speaking with me, and you refused to speak to me. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
But you have contacted an attorney about possibly suing the city. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Dwight Burton?
I don't know. My attorney is supposed to be getting me a lawyer.
So you're contemplating civil action against the city over this incident. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You walked down to Easy Liquors. Did Soup go with you?
No, sir.
Who went down there with you? Robin Robinson?
Yes, sir.
And you said you went down there to purchase a toy.
I didn't purchase it.
What are you talking about?
I object to the relevance.
I didn't understand.
I don't know if it's drugs or alcohol or what. I'm trying to figure out what she was going to the liquor store
A
for.
toy is not drugs or alcohol.
What is it?
I object to the relevance, Your Honor.
What are we trying to?
I'm just trying to find out why she went to the liquor store with Robin Robinson, who may also be another witness, and what they purchased.
Well, and my objection is that that has nothing to do with the facts to be determined here today.
I think we've all understood that she's under the influence of alcohol or drugs.
But some drugs affect people differently, and I'm just trying to understand why. Robin Robinson was also interviewed as a part of Major Bowles' investigation, and there may be some testimony from her, and I want to know I don't know why they went to Easy Liquors to purchase a toy. I don't know if that's a toy, T-O-Y. I don't know if that's a certain drink, if it's a drug, I don't know what it is.
And my objection, Your Honor, is that it doesn't matter. It's not relevant to whether or not Sergeant K violated the policy by beating a handcuffed prisoner on the ground.
This lady is the only reason we're here today, and I would respectfully submit to Your Honor that I think my cross-examination should be very liberal.
That may be true, but we don't want to spend all day chasing around what she did all day when we all understand that she's under the influence of alcohol and drugs and was I don't know the right term for it, but was out of control.
I understand. I think probably this objection and argument has taken longer than the answer would have taken, quite frankly.
That's probably true. Do you know what you were going there to get?
I'm sorry.
You knew what you were going to the liquor store to buy?
It was her money. She bought it. It was a toy.
T-O-Y, toy.
T-O-Y.
Okay, let's go on.
Is it a children's toy?
No.
What is a toy?
A sex toy.
They sell those at the liquor store.
Yes, sir.
That has nothing to do with this part of it. Let's
Apparently
move
it
on.
would have nothing to do with it. So Ms. Robinson went down there to buy that, and then you all left there, and you went to Shake Rag, right?
I don't remember if I went to the Shake Rag before that or after.
But you ate with AJ,
Yes, sir.
and then you went back over to AJ's,
Yes, sir.
and then you went to your boyfriend's house, Robbie Pettigo,
Yes, sir.
and y'all got into it
Yes, sir.
about him cheating on you.
I have no idea what we got into it for. I don't even remember the argument.
Well, you told Major Bowles that you got into an argument
This is what
for him
people
staying
told
out
me.
all night.
This is what the people told me. That's why we were arguing.
Okay. And then you went back over to Soup's house again, right? So you were at Soup's twice.
I don't remember.
But that's what you told Major Bowles, right?
I told most of what I told her is what people have told me.
But you didn't. I'm just going on since you wouldn't talk to me, I'm going on what you told Major Bowles. And you told Major Bowles that you went to Soup's house twice, and y'all drank off of a gallon of vodka.
I took 3 drinks.
3? You sure about that?
Yes, sir.
You do remember that, though, huh?
Yes, sir.
Well, you told Major Bowles you had 4 shots. So which
3
one?
or 4 shots
Okay.
of vodka.
So did you ever go to the doctor about your ears, your black eyes, or your migraines after you got out of jail?
No, sir. My migraines were gone away. After I got about a couple of days after I got out of jail, they stopped.
You hadn't had any problems?
Yes, I've had migraines since then,
But you had
but not
migraines
every
before?
night like I was before.
You've had headaches before?
Before, yes, I have.
Before this, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So you're not trying to suggest to the City Commission of Bowling Green that you got headaches because you got hit?
Yes, I think so.
You think so?
I believe that's the reason why I had migraines every night.
Let me show you a booking photo when you came into the jail on August the 14th of 2013.
Yes, sir.
Is that you?
Yes, sir.
What were you in jail for that time?
Object to the relevance, Your Honor.
What are we trying to do?
Well, she's got a really big black eye in this picture. I'm trying to find out.
Okay.
I mean, she's claiming that these headaches are from that, but this jail booking photo clearly shows that she's been in multiple fights.
Okay.
How'd you get that black eye in that picture from a year before?
That's irrelevant.
I object to that characterization. I don't know how a booking photo can show that someone has been in multiple fights.
I understand, but let's find out what she's in.
How'd you get that black eye in that picture?
I got in a fight with my boyfriend.
Okay.
This picture is not the same date as the...
No, sir.
What date is on that picture?
8/13 of 13, is that right?
8/14.
Of 2013? So, not quite 6 months before that, you'd come to the jail and you'd been in a fight with your boyfriend not too long before that, right? Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you remember how you got the cuts on your hand?
No, sir.
I believe someone will testify here today or tonight that you punched the back of an air conditioner. Do you remember doing that?
No, sir.
Remember throwing a brick through anyone's back window of their house?
No, sir.
Do you know why you were put in the chair that night?
No, sir.
Did you know that you kicked Soup's door twice that night?
No, sir.
Are you the type of person that kicks when you get in fights?
I have.
You're a fighter, right?
If someone's hurting me, yeah, I defend myself.
And you tend to be a kicker more than a puncher?
No.
No. Did you get appropriate medical care at the jail?
I don't remember. I remember after I was put in a cell, they wrapped my hand every day for like 3 or 4 days.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
You have any follow-up, Mr. Milliken?
Just a couple. Were you paying attention to how much Soup had to drink that day?
No, sir.
Okay. Have you ever, at other times, had situations like this where you just don't have a memory of what occurred?
Yes, sir.
I mean, does that occur often, or?
No, sir.
Okay. You said you were having migraines afterwards,
Yes, sir.
and how long did that last for?
For about a month.
That's all. Thank you for answering my questions,
Mr.
Chris.
Simpson?
Is it fair to say you've probably been arrested 15, 20 times in Warren County Jail?
I object to the relevance.
We all understand she's had her issues with the law and in fact in jail at this moment. Any questions from the commission? Will we be releasing this?
A subject to recall, but I think we know where, unfortunately, to find her.
Thank you for coming in. We appreciate you taking the time to testify with us. Who's your next witness, Mr.
Oh,
Milliken?
yeah, I know. Captain Brian Harrell, Your Honor.
Get Brian for us, please, Ashley. What do you expect Brian to testify to, please?
Your Honor, he's the supervisor of Sergeant K. He's going to testify consistent with his employee conduct form dated 4/29/14.
Thank you.
Mayor, at this time, I would like to introduce those two photographs as Respondents Exhibits 1 and 2, one being the picture where she's smiling at the jail, and the second one being that other booking photo.
I have two objections. Number one, the first photograph's already been introduced, so it would be cumulative. Number two, the second photograph, the booking photo from 8 months prior, is not relevant to the issue before the commission.
I understand. We already have the one photo, is that correct?
Yeah, it's just, I didn't know if you were going to introduce that one. It's Exhibit A of ours. I'll tender it, and then we might this is B. I'm going to stick it.
If we've already got it, it's just doubling up, but that's fine. I'll let them both in. Can we see them, the other photographs too, please? Now. Brian, if you'll have a seat there in the middle where the microphone is. Raise your right hand, please. Testimony about to give be the truth. You swear the testimony about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please state your name.
My name is Brian Harrell.
And your rank and work address.
I'm a captain with the Bowling Green Police Department at 911 Kentucky Street.
Thank you. Mr. Milliken.
Thank you. Captain Harrell, how long have you been with the Bowling Green Police Department?
18 and a half years.
As a captain in the Bowling Green Police Department, do you have a supervisory capacity?
I do, yes, sir.
Is Sergeant Danica Kay one of, are you her supervisor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about this Bowling Green Police Department employee conduct form, and it's marked complaint, and it has employee name Danica Kay, and then it has employee supervisor Captain Brian Harrell, and I believe I can read your signature. That looks like your signature down there on the bottom, dated 4/29/14. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Explain what you did when you received the use of force report and what you did on this complaint, as far as what your complaint was based on the use of force.
Sure, yes, sir. On April the 27th, which was a Sunday, I received a text message from Sergeant Kay stating that there was an oversight and a use of force report, and there was an attachment not on that. And I have a copy of those text messages if you need those, but in stating that there would need to be an addition made in a further email, just making me aware that there would be a correction to this email, which is a common practice that we send out these use of force reports. And there was an attachment to that said in so many words, just to let you know, I had some trouble with an arrestee last night and went off on her. And
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said there.
And it says, and I went off on her. I have it with me. I can read it for you if you'd prefer. So I asked for some, I said, okay. And
is this the text messages now?
This is the text message.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And what did she say to you? If you have it there, if it
Sure.
helps you just to say exactly what she said to you.
Sure, I have them here. If you'll bear with me just a moment. I'll read it verbatim. It says, hey, Captain, I sent an email for you for a use of force that I did last night, but it looks like I forgot that attachment. To give you a heads up, Christy Faye Gammon spit all over me and, well, 3 dots, I let her have it. I will resend the email this evening with the attachment. My reply was, okay, has an exposure report been done? If needed, are you okay? What does let her have it mean? The reply was, I punched her in the face. My reply was, okay, I'll take a look at it.
And then I believe you go on to discuss issues concerning her getting an exposure report because Christy Faye Gammon had a communicable disease. Is that right? Is that what the...
That's the spirit of it. We didn't know for certain if there was a communicable disease, but there was certainly concern for it, and it's our common practice if there is a blood or saliva exposure, some risk put on the officer, that we go through some exposure processes to ensure as best we can the medical health of the officer.
And did she in fact do that?
She did.
I'm going to show you a one-page document and ask you, is that a true and correct copy of the text messages between you and Sergeant K that you just read to the commission?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I move to introduce this, thank you, as petitioner's next numbered exhibit.
No objection.
So moved.
Thank you. Okay, so then did you review the, after that text message, did you in fact then review the use of force report that she did?
I did, yes, sir.
And now I'm going to go back to the employee conduct form and ask you, this one is dated 4/29/14, and I'll just show you that too and see if you make sure you verify that that's accurate. Is this your employee conduct form?
Yes, sir, it is.
Is that your signature on the bottom of it?
Yes, sir.
And what's the date on that, please?
The 29th.
Okay. April 29th,
April
right?
29th, yes, sir.
So that would have been just a few days after the incident. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you talk with Sergeant K about it, or did you just have the information contained in the text message and her use of force report? Did you also have a conversation with her about it before you made this complaint?
Not in specifics. You have to understand that we had what we call shift change, meaning that that Saturday was her last work day. So she's going to be off Sunday and Monday.
Okay.
Tuesday is the first day back, and that's the 29th, which was the day that form is completed. By this time, I have read this use of force report that she submitted in the attachment, had some concerns about it, enough so that I had notified my chain of command, Major Melanie Watts, and knew that on this day, the first day back, that I would be requesting a written statement from Sergeant K. And when she came into work, I asked that she complete a written statement, which she did. And then it was after that, and having read that written statement, with both the use of force report and the written statement, that I used the content to complete that form.
Okay. So you read both the use of force report that she completed and her written statement, and then from both of those documents, that's how you got to this right here.
Yes, sir. That's why both are quoted in there.
Okay. And thank you. And this, what, based on your review of Sergeant K's use of force report and Sergeant K's written statement, what were your conclusions?
My belief at that time that the use of force was unnecessary, was excessive. It's not something that we're trained to do. It's not our practice. And we're expected to use the minimum amount of force necessary to stop an assault or to overcome resistance. And this seemed to go beyond that.
Okay. Any other problems that you found with her with this incident at all? Any other than you feel like she used unnecessary force?
Yes, sir.
And specifically, just so we can spell it out, did you have any issue with how she arrested her? I'm sorry.
Objection to the leading. I mean, he's leading. He has all morning.
There are ways to ask direct questions.
Okay, I don't think this is leading. Did you have any issue with the way that she arrested Christy Gammon and put her in cuffs?
I think I understand your question. No, I didn't see any problem with the probable cause for the arrest and the circumstances that led up to her being arrested and placed in handcuffs. It was the behavior after being handcuffed that caused alarm for me.
And specifically, what was that behavior?
That was the detailed behavior of the punching in the face that occurred while Miss Gammon was on the ground and in handcuffs after Sergeant K was spit on.
Any other behavior on a part of Sergeant K that you found objectionable?
I certainly feel like there was a better way to handle that based on what we're trained to do.
Okay. And so, based on your conclusions then, what did you do?
After I had her statement and after I completed that form, I forwarded that. On that evening, I spoke with her to say that I would be submitting a conduct form. I explained to her that this, in my opinion, irregardless of what any internal investigation would find, was unacceptable and would need to be corrected.
Very good. I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Simpson?
Captain Harrell, how are you?
I'm all right, sir.
Is it safe to say to the commission that you weren't out there that night on that call?
That's right, I wasn't there.
And it's always different when you're there than when you're Monday morning quarterbacking someone, correct?
Sure.
It's easy to look back in hindsight, or if we're watching the instant replay of a game on TV, you can see the open receiver sometimes where perhaps the quarterback can't because of other things going on.
Yes, sir.
And you do understand that officers in the field are faced with things that perhaps don't get communicated properly in a text message or in a written report, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those certainly text messages don't always have the context of what else may have been going on out there that night.
Yes.
Okay. In your policies and procedures manual, it's under 3.1.6.3. There is something in here that says, it talks about justification, and albeit it says using deadly force. Let me read this to you. Justification for the use of deadly force must be limited to what reasonably appears to be the facts known by an officer at the time he decides to use such force. Facts unknown to the officer, no matter how compelling, cannot be considered in later determining whether the shooting was justified. So, would you agree with me that you can't really Monday morning quarterback anybody if you don't know what was really going through their head when they use force on someone?
I understand what you're saying, but we still have the duty and supervision to analyze as best we can to determine if the practice was professionally and legally sound.
May not have been the best practice, but you do understand where she got called to. Have you listened to the dispatch tapes?
I have not, no.
Okay. So you don't know what she was going into over there when she got there?
No.
Did you know that one of the 911 calls, a lady was screaming and saying, "Please come, they've got a knife after my son"? Do you know any of that?
No, sir.
You do know that the area of 11th and Payne, though, is a high crime area.
I do.
I mean, at 18 and a half years, you know where there's more likely to be a shooting or a stabbing, and that's in that area of town, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the officers who are responding to calls also know that the likelihood of them getting into a scrape or a fight or having to draw their weapons is probably a lot greater there than it is in other parts of town.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Milliken pulled these Under Armour gloves out earlier. Are the officers issued or allowed to wear Under Armour gloves, black, thin gloves?
I don't know if they're issued or not, but they are permitted.
They're permitted. And lots of times officers don't want to come into contact with bodily fluids or things of that nature, or if they think they're going to be in a fight, they don't want to hurt themselves. Is that correct?
Sure.
So the fact that Officer K had gloves on during this altercation is of no significance to you, correct?
No.
Okay. Now, do you know how big the crowd was that was starting to gather when Sergeant K was trying to tell Christy Faye Gammon to sit down and to be quiet?
No.
Would you agree that one officer with multiple people around could be a very dangerous situation if they don't have backup there on scene yet?
Could be.
Okay. And that would raise that officer's level of perhaps awareness, and maybe a little adrenaline may be starting to rush too if there's a lot of people there and you're the only one on the ground. Fair statement?
Sure.
Okay. Your only concern in this entire situation here is whether or not Sergeant K spit on her. Sergeant K struck her only because she was being spat upon.
No, I don't think that's a fair statement.
You don't think that's a fair statement? Are you aware that Miss Gammon was kicking and still resisting Sergeant K when she struck her?
I'm aware of that. Yes, sir.
And that wasn't in the text message,
Correct.
but it was in her written statement.
Yes, sir.
And when she was interviewed by Major Bowles, she also told Major Bowles that she was still actively resisting being in custody, correct?
Correct.
And were you aware that, do you think it's a good idea to tase someone who is possibly pregnant, that told you they're pregnant?
No, sir.
Would you agree that it's not a good idea for someone with a communicable disease such as hepatitis C, that you probably spraying them with OC spray is probably not a good idea either?
Sure.
Because they're going to start salivating and spitting and God knows what else. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you would not have condoned Sergeant K pulling out her flashlight and hitting her with the flashlight, would you?
No, I would not have.
Okay. So there are just certain alternatives that are left at this point if Sergeant K reasonably believes that she is being assaulted. She's got limited options with this individual, does she not?
That's correct.
And whether we like it or not, sometimes it just comes down to a fight, doesn't it?
There are times when we have to fight.
And sometimes you just got to throw the punch, don't you?
Well, to be taken in proper context, though, there's
Right.
a time to fight, but we fight to stop a threat or to use the minimum amount of force necessary. It's
Right.
my belief in this case that the fight was over. She was already in handcuffs and on the ground and lying on her back. So to be punched in the face several times while on the ground, irregardless of how big a problem this person may have been, was excessive.
Regardless of whether Officer or Sergeant K thought that she was trying to kick her in the chest or in the groin or blow out her knee, that would be okay for Ms. Gammon to do?
Well, it's never okay for anyone to intentionally try to harm an officer. However, one of my biggest concerns, and it is present in her statement, there's a line that says, "At this point, I lost all patience with Miss Gammon,"
Right.
and then punched her in the face several times.
Right.
That, in my opinion, crosses the line from professional to emotional and personal. And that's a line that officers cannot cross. It's time to step away, stand up, get some distance, do something other than punch her in the face several times because you got spit on.
Now, do you know why she lost patience with her? Was it because she got spit on, or was it because she was being assaulted?
I'm sure it was a totality of things. These are dynamic moments, and they're not easy.
And officers are required to make snap decisions that may or may not cost them their lives.
That's true, but Sergeant K is an 11-year veteran who has, I'm sure, been in fights before. And it's my belief that she made the wrong choice that day.
You would agree with me that this 5 seconds of this punching does not define Sergeant K's career.
I would agree with that.
She's been an excellent Bowling Green City police officer and a Bowling Green police sergeant.
She's earned her keep, no doubt.
Is it fair to characterize Sergeant K's reporting of this incident as being very open, very honest? I mean, she didn't try to hide this from you or anyone else, did she?
She did not.
And in your original accusation that Mr. Milliken has been talking about, you didn't say anything about her getting or not getting medical treatment, correct?
That's correct.
And to the best of your knowledge, Christy Faye Gammon did not sustain a, quote, serious physical injury as defined under the KRS, did she?
No, not that I know of.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Milken?
Mr. Simpson asked you, and you agreed that Sergeant K was an excellent officer. Are you aware of her prior disciplinary history?
I have read her file in time, but I couldn't tell you with any give you any substance on it right now.
Does she have a prior disciplinary history?
If we're going
Well,
to
I
start
think
getting
you
everybody's
opened it.
personal, well, I asked if she was an excellent officer. I didn't ask if she had prior things.
I think you opened the
But
door.
you opened that door, Alan.
Well, then it's going to be a wide door. We're going to start talking about all the stuff that he doesn't want us to talk about. If we're going to start talking about it now, then let's just go ahead and start talking about it.
Well, this is something that should be reserved for if we get to a penalty phase.
If we get there, I agree.
I would agree with that.
I think that's all. Thank you for answering my questions.
All right, who's your next witness, please?
Major Penny Bowles.
Could you send Penny in when you get ready, please?
I don't think so. Well, yeah, I will move the introduction of his employee conduct complaint.
No objection.
Start getting the next witness
Just for-
when Wesley's
to be complete.
cross-examining him for the second time. Can you go on and get the witness coming up here? That'll save some time.
Yeah, but they can't come in, is the only thing.
They just say that
Yeah.
first.
Thank you.
Wes, do you know who you're going to call after Penny?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't mean to be being cagey with you, but I just haven't decided exactly.
Just trying to compress the time.
They'll be right here, whoever it is.
Katie. Katie. I'm sorry I didn't ask. Did y'all have any questions for Captain Harold? I forgot to ask. Major Bowles, would you sit in the chair there, right in the center of the table, and raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Please have a seat. You state your name, rank, and work address, please.
Penny Bowles, I'm a major, and I work for the Bowling Green Police Department at 911 Kentucky Street.
Thank you, Mr. Milliken.
Thank you. Major Bowles, what's your position as major at the Bowling Green Police Department? What's been your role in this incident here?
Yes, sir. I was assigned the internal affairs investigation.
Okay, and who assigned the internal affairs investigation to you?
Chief Hawkins.
Do you have your investigative file there with you today, or parts of it? Okay. Let me just ask you this.
I do have part of it, but the
Okay.
internal affairs one.
Did you interview? Let's just start with Sergeant K. What was your I want you to explain to me what your interaction was once you got assigned this investigation. What your interaction with Sergeant K was and what she told you, starting from your first interaction with her about it.
Yes, sir. I had a few opportunities of text messaging various information, and we scheduled the interview. The interview was on May 22nd, and it was held at the police department upstairs in our administrative conference room. Captain Brian Harrell was present with me during the interview. Sergeant K had been served a 48-hour notice on May the 20th.
And tell us what that 48-hour notice is, just so everybody understands what that is.
As part of the Police Officers' Bill of Rights, but you're issued a 48-hour notice before having any questions, so you can prepare yourself, seek counsel. It was served to her by Captain Harrell on the 20th, and our interview was on the 22nd.
Okay. So you complied with giving her 48 hours to think about what she wanted to tell you. Is that the purpose of that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So you conduct this interview with her on May the 26th. Captain Brian Harrell's there. Tell us.
On the 22nd, sir. May 22nd.
May 22nd. I'm sorry. Tell the commission what Sergeant K told you.
Basically, our interview was about 2.5 hours long, so it was a rather lengthy interview. I started off the interview by reading Sergeant K or Garrity warning which that basically says that anything in the administrative hearing that she says to us cannot be used in any kind of criminal proceedings. So I read her that warning, and we signed. She signed acknowledgement that I had read that to her. And I basically just started off the interview by just asking her to tell me her side of the story, what happened in her own words. So she, and I asked her basically to begin with the entire day of Saturday, just start from the very beginning. And she had said that she had worked a couple of special events that morning. There was the Humane Society walk and the Run for Autism. So she had worked those as overtime. Said that she had gone home, took a short nap, and then had to work her regularly scheduled afternoon shift that afternoon. So she continued on, so that she was, it was a really pretty day that day, and her and Sergeant Porter were the only supervisors working, and they were very busy. She said that they only had probably about 10 officers working along with the two supervisors that day. She basically said she responded to a collision on the way into work, and that basically they had, her and Sergeant Porter tried to eat, but they had to respond to a domestic call, and basically said the shift was very busy that day. Sergeant Case said she received the call as she got to the station trying to do some paperwork, and didn't even make it out of the car when they dispatched her to a fight at 11th and Payne. She advised that the dispatcher said that there were several subjects involved, and she responded level 3, which is non-emergency, from the back of the station, and said that she basically in all hopes that the fight would be gone before she got there, because they had been really busy and she had a lot of paperwork to complete, that since this was her last day before her days off, she had to get all of her paperwork completed. Sergeant K said she responded level 3 and responded near the Studio 201 apartments and heard a lot of people hollering and screaming. She observed Christy Gammon yelling and walking from the house behind 11th and Payne. She was screaming, cussing, causing a disturbance. And she approached Gammon and asked her what was going on with her and had her sit down. Apparently she was still cussing, screaming, carrying on, and Sergeant K said at first she was screaming to the people at 10th Street, and then, I'm sorry, at the 10th side of Payne Street, and Sergeant K was warning her to calm down, quit cussing, quit swearing, quit causing a disturbance, quit being disorderly, basically. And Sergeant K advised that Gammon basically told it, F you, and what are you going to do, arrest me for disorderly? So, and that she wasn't scared. So Sergeant K advised that she let the comment go because she was by herself. Said she had a yard full of people and she didn't know what was going on. But she said that she kind of kept on, and so Sergeant K told her to stand up. She was under arrest, and Gammon did not comply with her orders, and she told her either stand up or I'll stand you up. And she then Gammon jumped up kind of quickly and turned away from her and threw her hands behind her back. So Kay said she made contact with her. She became combative and started pulling away as soon as she touched her, and did she called it a dance in the middle of the street. She didn't have a really good grip on her arm. She went to do a modified armbar takedown, which basically she was bringing her down to the ground in order to place her in a position where she could be handcuffed. And she didn't really have a good grip of the arm. She lost kind of control of it, and they both fell on the ground. She said Gammon was on her back, and Kay was kind of on top of her, and that that Gammon kind of kicked her in the chest. It didn't really hurt. It was more because she's very intoxicated. It was more of a push with her leg. Kay said that she rolled Gammon over to her stomach, put her knee across her back, and was able to get her handcuffed. And at that time, she said, Kay said that Gammon had told her she was pregnant. She was pregnant. So Sergeant Kay, hearing that, immediately took her knee and weight off of her and tried to put her in a seated position and told her basically to just sit there. Kay said that she was concerned about excited delirium and making sure that the arrestee could breathe. Kay continued, said that that Gammon was seated but began to kick violently, and basically she was just like throwing a temper tantrum. Basically she would roll over back onto her stomach, and she'd have to be rolled back over and told to be seated. A couple of times, Kay advised that she got distance from Gammon and called for MedCom and had MedCom come to the scene for Ms. Gammon. And apparently shortly after she called for MedCom, Gammon flopped over again, and Kay approached Ms. Gammon from the front, like her facing her feet, walking towards her, and that's when Ms. Gammon spit. And she said that she was, and I quote, "She looked me in the eye, attempted to spit in my face, and was still kicking, clearly not under control. Yes, she was somewhat handcuffed, but still kicking, and now she's spitting." Sergeant Kay said she was done with that situation at that point. She was not subdued, was not following orders. And Terry Campbell, who was one of the witnesses on the scene, pled with her not to be tased. And basically...
I'm sorry, would you repeat that? I didn't catch that part of it.
That Mr. Campbell had advised Sergeant Kay, he was pleading with Sergeant Kay not to tase Ms. Gammon.
Okay, thank you.
Sergeant Kay continued and said that Gammon had, two people around her, and she was spitting, and went to spit on her face and went on her uniform. And she said she went down to the ground and delivered probably 3, and her direct quote was, "I delivered probably 3. I keep trying to remember. It wasn't like I didn't rain 55 punches. I didn't do that." And she said basically she remembered 3, several is 3, but she knew it wasn't more than 4 closed fist strikes to her face. She said that about that time, Officer Owen arrived on the scene, and she engaged Mr. Campbell. Kay believed that Owen thought that maybe she was in between a fight with 2 people, with Campbell and with Gammon, but she told Officer Owen that Campbell was there just trying to help calm things down. And then basically she advised that after Owen was there was another lady that came and talked to her, that she was there waiting for MedCom to try to check her out. And then basically she said that Gammon did not go with MedCom. Her direct quote was, "She did not go with MedCom. She refused, ? I'm not really sure what happened there because they left while we were trying to deal with whatever happened behind whatever started all of this." So basically she was saying she wasn't sure what happened with MedCom. She was checking to see what was going on around the scene.
And that's Sergeant Kay, not Officer
Yes,
Owen?
Sergeant Kay.
Okay.
Basically said that Kay went directly to the jail. Officer Owen transported Ms. Gammon to the jail, but Sergeant Kay went directly to the jail. Said that she had some injuries, and once she got into the light at the jail, she realized that she had been bleeding more than what she had originally thought. That she got checked out at the jail, and that she came back to the station, did all of her use of force paperwork, had taken pictures of Gammon, and also provided those pictures to the jail because Ms. Gammon had her hand wrapped, and then that way the medical staff didn't, or the jail staff didn't have to unwrap the treatment. So Sergeant Kay said she had given her pictures to the jail, and that was basically her account of the events. And I asked her if she had anything else that she wanted to say or clarify anything before I asked for specific events.
Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions. Did Kay ever advise you whether or not she was aware before being spit on that Christy Gammon had a communicable disease risk?
She said she did not know specifically. We have a 10 code that we use for a person that has communicable illness or disease. And it basically means for the person to use universal precautions with that person. And Sergeant Kay had advised that she had not had any personal dealings or personal knowledge of Miss Gammon's medical conditions, but known from prior radio traffic that the 10 code 1060 was always used with her, advising officers to use universal precautions.
Okay. So then was she aware of that?
She said she was, yes,
Okay.
sir. She was not, at the time of the incident, she was not aware of a specific illness,
aware it
but
was
she knew that
hepatitis.
she was not aware it was hepatitis, no.
Okay.
At the time. She knew that she had that 10 code associated with her.
Did you ask Sergeant Kay? There's been some discussion about this was a bad area. There was lots of people out there. This was a dangerous situation. Did you ask Sergeant Kay about why not wait for backup to arrive based on those circumstances?
Yes, sir. After Sergeant Kay gave her account of the events, I had several questions and clarifying questions, and that was one of them.
Well, I want to go through those if you don't mind, and you can just start with that one, and then how. Let me just ask you another way. You said there was some clarifying questions that you wanted to ask, just in whatever order you want to go in. Why don't you tell us about those and what Sergeant Kay's responses were?
After I asked Sergeant Kay if there was anything she wanted to clarify, the last statement she put was, quote, "No other than Michelle, Officer Owen, was the first person to get there, and until then I was by myself." That was what she had asked and stated. I had asked her what other officers arrived on the scene. I asked her if she had pressed her orange panic button. We have a button on our radio in case that we're ever in trouble without having to get on the radio to talk. We can just press this orange, we call it a panic button. And that kind of alerts the troops that you need help. Sergeant Kay advised she did not press her orange button. She didn't want to get everybody, as she quote, emotionally charged if you don't have to. She advised that she thought that the officers would know by the tone of her voice that she needed some help, so she didn't press her orange button. She talked about the officers that arrived, Officer Biddle, Officer Poteet, and Sergeant Porter. I had asked her if she was familiar with Miss Gammon, and she advised that she was not had never any direct dealings with her. I also asked if she was familiar with Mr. Campbell or Mr. Allen, who were the two gentlemen that were standing there with Miss Gammon, and she advised not until before that night she had not been familiar with them. I had asked her to draw a map just of the area of the scene, just to kind of point where everybody was, just so I got a better understanding of where everybody was at the scene. I had asked her how Gammon was dressed, and she described what she was wearing: the large white shirt with blood on it, black legging type pants, missing shoes, wearing only one sock. I asked her about other than the blood on the shirt, was there any other injuries that Gammon had? Sergeant Kay advised she had looked like she had been in some kind of physical altercation. She couldn't tell if she had blood or bruises on her face. And she had made a comment about a Band-Aid that had covered a spot on her hand, and blood had dripped on her legs and feet. Kay had described Gammon earlier as obviously intoxicated, so I had asked Sergeant Kay to elaborate on the meaning of obviously intoxicated, and Sergeant Kay responded saying slurred speech, clothing in disarray, cussing, unstable on her feet, not making any sense with what she was saying. And I had asked for an example of what she would say that didn't make sense, and Sergeant Kay had advised something about black guys, a bunch of cuss words, and then saying, "You're against me because I'm white and you're white. No, you're black and I'm white," and said she was just not really making a whole lot of sense. Sergeant Kay thought that originally that Gammon was under the influence maybe of synthetic marijuana and not just alcohol. She said that Gammon had told her she had drank about a gallon of vodka, but Sergeant Kay wasn't sure how true that was, and that Gammon had also advised Sergeant Kay that she had done meth the previous day. But Kay really said that she felt like Miss Gammon was under the influence of synthetic marijuana. And I had asked Sergeant Kay to explain to me what the urgency of making the arrest on Gammon was, since she was extremely outnumbered with a lot of people there that she didn't know. And she had said that Sergeant Kay advised that she had thought about that, but in her mind at the time, she knew her backup was coming and probably close to being on scene. And she advised that that was a wrong assumption for her to be making. Sergeant Kay advised from the time that she went to put handcuffs on Gammon to the time Owen arrived, it seemed like a very lengthy amount of time, but in all actuality, it probably wasn't. She said that the reason she let Gammon go on and on originally was because she was outnumbered and didn't want to make the arrest by herself, but she advised Gammon kept elevating the situation. I asked her, Sergeant Kay, if she knew what units were coming to back her on the call, and she advised that she knew Michelle Owen was backing, but she did not know exactly where she was coming from. And I asked her, she said Owen's district assignment is Baker 49, which is a 40 district, but she was not responding from District 40. I had asked Kay up to this point of the arrest if Gammon had threatened, kicked, spit, or made any comments to anybody. She said no, that Gammon had dropped the N-bomb, as she called it, a couple of times, but that's not anything but typical. I asked Sergeant Kay if Gammon began resisting at first touch with the handcuffs or with the contact with her hands, or with handcuffs, and she said no, that the first touch was the hands prior to getting cuffed. So I asked her to explain how she handcuffed Miss Gammon. Normally when officers go to arrest somebody, they get their handcuffs out and they have them to handcuff somebody. But Sergeant Kay said she didn't have her handcuffs out at that point because of
Battery dying in her microphone.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time. I don't know if it's.
Do I need to
Let's try it there. Yeah.
right into it? Does that help? Okay, I'm sorry. Sergeant Kay described that she grabbed both of Gammon's hands while she was behind her back. She didn't grab her hand with handcuffs. She just grabbed her hands before she got the handcuffs out of her pouch. She said that she was trying to balance Gammon and get her situated, but she basically had put her hands behind her back, and Gammon had moved her arms out away from her body. And that's how she was able to get the one hand to do the armbar takedown. So she had her hands behind her back and pulled her arms out like that is how Sergeant Kay described it for me. She had grabbed both hands, but when she pulled her arms away, she had just grabbed the one right hand.
Let me ask you this. Did Sergeant Kay, after she got her handcuffed, did she disengage from her?
Yes, when she got her down on the ground, she got her handcuffed. She rolled her over from her back onto her stomach, got her handcuffed, sat her up in an upright position, and stepped away from her.
And what did she do? What did she tell you that she did when she stepped away from her?
She advised that she called for MedCom.
And did she give you reasons why she called for MedCom?
Yes, sir. She said basically the excited delirium, blood. Hold on 1 second. I'll find exactly what she said. But basically, she was obviously intoxicated, thought that she was pregnant, had blood on her shirt, bloody hands, and excited delirium.
What is an excited delirium?
It's a medical condition. It's an extreme medical condition that can be a life-threatening condition. That basically your heart rate, your breathing. It's usually been associated with taser, but you get basically like a superhuman type strength. But your heart rate is elevated, and several times people that have died in police custody associated with taser have been attributed to excited delirium.
And Kay advised you that that was one of the reasons why she called MedCom?
Yes.
Did you ask Kay about whether this was an emotional response?
I did.
And what did she tell you about that?
I asked Kay if it wasn't all emotional. It was probably 50% emotional and 50% she wasn't under control, period. And then I asked her about the 50% emotional, 50% not under proper control, and she advised, quote, "My point is that it wasn't Danica got mad and hit this girl in the head. That's not," and then she went on to explain about her writing the use of force report. But she basically, that was her answer, that it was 50% emotional, 50% Gamma not being under proper control.
Okay. Is there any significance to the fact that she approached her from the front, and if so, what is that?
Generally, when you have somebody that's combative, even if they're not combative, kicking or spitting, it's basically we approach from the 2.5 position or from behind because you put yourself in danger of being spit on or being kicked if you walk full up on somebody. So basically, safety-wise and how we're trained is you approach from either the sides, or if she's moving around, you can approach from the back.
Did you discuss that with Sergeant Kay?
I did.
And what did she have to say about that, about her approach?
She basically said that that between Mr. Campbell and Mr. That the two gentlemen were standing up kind of at the front of her, and she just basically walked up to the front, from the front, and she realized that that's not, because I asked her, if you were arresting this person, where would you be? And she said that she would be from the back, and I agreed that that was where she should approach from. And but she said at the time that the two gentlemen were at the front, and that she walked up, and basically as she was walking up, she realized that that wasn't the proper place for her to be, but it was basically too late.
Did you talk with her about EMS and whether or not EMS was assessed her at the scene?
Yes, sir.
And what did she tell you about? You've already told us the reasons why she told you she called EMS, but what did she tell you when it happened when EMS got there?
She advised that EMS had gotten there, but she really didn't remember all that was going on. She talked to one of the EMTs, and they had given her some Cavacid wipes to wipe the spit off of her, and that she didn't really know whether or not Owen had called for MedCom to come talk to Gammon, or she was really not sure what happened there. That's what she exactly said. I'm not sure what happened with that.
Well, did she tell you that she was the one that called the EMTs to begin with, though?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did she advise you about anything she said to the crowd after this incident?
She advised that there had been some people in the crowd around her that were pretty upset with her and were making comments towards her. And Sergeant K said that that the crowd was saying basically, "You can't do that. She's in handcuffs." Blah blah blah. Sergeant K advised that she got up and told them she wasn't under control, and when you spit on the police and don't do what you're told, then I'm going to do what I'm going to do to protect myself, or something like that, but I let them know.
Mr. Milliken, I'm going to interrupt you at this point. We need to take just a few minute break.
Okay.
If you'll give us just a couple minutes. Okay, Mr. Milliken, sorry to interrupt you. Please continue.
It's okay. Thank you. Major Bowles, I want to ask you, you were going on along about what Sergeant K had told you. I want to ask you when you on page, I'm looking at your report concerning her statement, May 22nd, on page 14, you start talking to her about her report and her written report. Can you tell the commission what you asked her about her written reports that she'd submitted and what her response was about those?
Yes, sir. I asked Sergeant K, actually on the bottom of page 13 is where it starts. The portion of her statement where Sergeant K writes, and quote, "I lost all patience with Gammon and struck her." I basically asked her if she had an officer that she supervised that wrote that, what would her response be? And she said that she would obviously ask questions about it. And I asked her if she would condone this type of behavior, and reread the statement and said how that reads. Sergeant K interrupted me and exclaims, "That reads terrible." I finished my question and says, "How that reads, would you condone that behavior?" Sergeant K said that she would be asking questions and have him explain to it, but if you have somebody that just lets loose and hits somebody, then no. So I continued asking, how are we supposed to take this, meaning we, the police department, and she interjected and said, "You can take it however you want to," and she kind of like chuckled. I said, "Well, how are we supposed to know what this means other than what it says?" And she said, so basically, that she should have given herself more time to have written her statement. And she had written that statement on Tuesday. But she advised that she had lost all patience. She met with the situation and had lost all patience with Payne Street. But she advised the way that she wrote her statement was terrible. And I advised that language is terrible. And then we went on to talk about her text messages to Captain Harrell.
Okay. So, did she ever tell you that what she put in her statement was not accurate?
No, sir.
Okay. She just didn't like the way it read.
Objection to leading.
I'll withdraw the question. Was that the only, that interview, you say that lasted about 2.5 hours, was that the only interview that you had with Sergeant K?
Yes, sir.
You interview, well, I don't want to lead you, but did you interview other people in connection with the incident?
Yes, sir.
And just kind of, I don't mean you need to name everybody, but who all did you talk to?
I talked to Sergeant K, Officer Owen, Officer Biddle, Officer Poteet, Sergeant Porter, Deputy Ennis from the jail, Christy Gammon, Terry Campbell, Mr. Allen, and probably 5 or 6 other witnesses from Payne Street.
Okay. Was there anybody that you felt like you needed to interview that you were not able to interview?
No, sir.
Okay. Based on your investigation, what were your conclusions regarding the actions of Sergeant K on the night in question?
I typed up my entire interview summary and the entire case file and submitted to Chief Hawkins. But the chief is the one that finds the...
Right. So you don't make any conclusions whatsoever. You just gather the evidence and then you submit it to him. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Simpson?
Major Bowles, I kept calling you Major Leonard earlier, so I apologize. You weren't here to hear it, but get that out in the open. Do you do regular patrol duties at this point in your career?
No, sir.
And I know you work security details, football games and things like that, overtime, extra income for you. Is that right?
Occasionally, yes, sir.
When was the last time you've been in a fight out on the street?
Probably when I was a patrol captain 2 years ago.
2 years ago. And you realize, and I would assume you do understand, those things are very dynamic.
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
Lots
sir.
of things going on, a lot of adrenaline rushing, those kinds of things, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. You agree that that area of town would be considered to be a high crime area?
I believe so.
A lot of drug activity?
I believe so.
A lot of violent activity?
I believe so.
Okay. In the course of your investigation, did you, in fact, obtain a copy of the 911 calls that came in that night?
Related to this incident, yes, sir.
And did you make that part of your case file?
Yes, sir.
Mayor, I'd like to play that now, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Just again, Mayor, note my objection to the relevance.
I understand. We'll listen to it.
No, what is emergency?
You gotta get over here, goddamn. Now the fucking go hard my side.
What's your address, ma'am?
I'm over here on 48th Street. What's on the street? It's over on Payne Street. Get over here. They got my son. We're nodding and everything. Please.
Give me an address on Payne Street.
What is this address? Get an address. 11th Street. Please get over here.
Ambulance.
I don't know. They all dumped him. Please. These are crazy people over here. I've never lived such a fight in my life. Hello?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm getting them on the way.
Crazy man. Get away from me. Please come over here.
Still people with knives out there?
Please come. Please come now.
Officers on the way. Is there still anyone with a knife out there?
Oh, get ready. Stop and tell me, motherfucker. Please get over here.
Do you see anybody with a knife there?
Coming. Stop it down the wall.
That was the second of 2 calls, correct?
Sorry, please just put your hands.
Send an officer over here at 11th and Payne. A big fight across the street. Somebody's going to get hurt.
11th and Payne. Do you know what address they're at?
No, just on the corner over here.
Okay, how many people are there?
I don't know. I can't
Maybe
talk
just a
because
couple
they'll
people?
hear me. They'll hear me, and I don't want to be involved.
Okay, but we need to know. Is it just a couple people, or is it...
I don't know. It looks like 4 or 5.
Okay, how do we know?
No, what is emergency?
So those were the 2. those were the two 911 calls, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And how would you describe those individuals who called in, especially the first one I played, which was actually the second in time?
Yes, sir.
How would you describe what kind of situation Sergeant K was driving into over there that night?
Well, just for the record, Sergeant K did not hear those phone
Right.
calls. Those were dispatched by a dispatcher. The dispatchers are the ones that answer those calls.
I understand that.
How would I describe that phone call?
How would you describe that phone call?
It, out of control, loud, a lot of people, disarray.
Dangerous?
Yes, sir.
Chaotic?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear in that phone call the caller say, "Christy Fay, get away from him"?
Yes.
Did you follow up to find out? Did you find out who that phone call came from?
That is from the lady that was talking, I believe, to Christy Fay at the very end.
Okay.
No.
And did you ask her if Christy Fay had been in a fight?
She didn't remember much about. She knew that she had been into a fight with her parents earlier that day, but
She told you that Christy Fay had been pushed off the porch by her dad, right?
Correct.
Did she tell you that she'd also been in a fight with her boyfriend?
I believe. I can't remember if she was the one that said it, but I knew that they had been involved in a fight, and that she also was involved in a fight at 1101 Payne with the residents that lived upstairs.
Did you interview speaking of that, did you interview the residents at 1101 Payne?
I went by there several times and never could reach anybody. And
How many times did you go by there?
I went by there once for sure, and then I went, when I interviewed Mr. Allen, I asked him who lived there. And I can't remember if I went back that day or if I can't remember. Once for sure, though, I know that.
So you didn't go by several times, you went by once.
Well, I went in the area several times interviewing people.
But you only went to 1101 Payne Street with the intention of trying to interview those people one time.
Yes, sir.
And what time of day did you go?
In the middle of the day, maybe 1 or 2 o'clock.
Did you ever try to send another unit over there to make contact with them?
No, sir.
Okay. Why is that?
I just didn't.
Okay. Am I correct in understanding that from your investigation, you don't have a problem with the fact that Ms. Gammon was arrested? In fact, you really haven't reached any conclusions about whether it was right or wrong at this point anyway, correct?
I have reached my own conclusions, yes.
But not
The officially conclusions come from the chief.
From the chief. So you'll leave that to the chief, I take it.
That is how we do our investigations.
I understand. Let me play, if I may, the rest of the dispatch recordings, because you did put this in your case file. Is that correct? May I do that? They're very short.
Yes, sir. Gene?
Just again, I object to the relevance. They weren't heard by Sergeant K. So.
And what you're playing now is the dispatch to Sergeant K.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll withdraw that then.
Gene?
Can I have Major Bowles come around here for just a second? I think I got these in the right chronological order. I just want to verify that that's right. Major Bowles, do I have these in the correct chronological order from the timestamps there? And I know it may take a second.
Baker one. Back out on my report completion in the relock.
Who's Baker 1?
Sergeant K.
Sergeant K.
Stand by for receiving a call of a fight, the corner of West 11th and Payne. West 11th and Payne received 2 calls. Both callers have been uncooperable. They described 4 to 5 subjects, unknown weapons, just yet. Baker 1, 2145.
49 headquarters.
It's Baker 17.
Report, southbound.
Baker 17, 2145. Baker 49, go ahead.
Premier, command right off.
Headquarters, Baker 1.
Let me ask you, you heard that just then. Was that where the caller accidentally called dispatch back, or you hear the same voice kind of yelling and a lot of screaming in the background?
units responding to the fight, West 11th in pain. Another caller is advising lots of yelling and parties with knives.
Back on Eckler.
There one.
Going on in there. Back one, Eckler.
There one.
One in custody. Start, Metcalf.
One in custody, Sergeant Metcalf, is that what she said?
Yes, sir.
And that was Sergeant K, correct?
Yes.
One in custody, MS will be advised, 2150.
Baker 49 headquarters.
Baker 49.
Baker 69 headquarters.
Baker 69.
Go on theme there. You got the suspicious vehicle. If you go ahead with it.
Suspicious vehicles at Fleeland, 1100 Three Springs Road. A passenger car and a truck parked at the gate with no headlights on.
Devil.
Headquarters, Baker 1, go ahead.
Let me ask you this, did you ask, dispatch called back to Baker 1 and said, Baker 1, go ahead. Did Sergeant K tell you that during the scuffle that her microphone had been keyed accidentally?
Yes.
Okay, so that's why dispatch heard that, didn't hear her say anything, and called back to check on her safety, correct?
And she said that she had said accidental. That was her reply.
Okay.
I think.
But her microphone got keyed somehow.
I think she said she keyed it, and she said accidental, but
Okay.
I don't remember her saying it got keyed, like somebody else keyed it. I think
But it
she
got
said
keyed.
It got
Okay. I got a chick. Freaking resisting.
I got a chick friggin' resistant, correct?
Yeah, I actually thought she said I got kicked.
Okay.
Resisting. I didn't hear that. I got a chick resisting.
So you don't know if it was a chick or a kid?
Well, I guess now that you say it, it sounds like she says chick, but when I heard it, I thought she said I got a kick.
Okay.
But
So, okay, you're gonna take my word for it?
I mean, you can play it again if it's.
Let me out over the radio.
Baker 17, did you?
Yes.
35 headquarters.
Baker 35.
Arrest citations on your printer. I'm in service and go ahead and show me out at the call with Baker 1. Baker 3 headquarters.
Baker 3.
I'm in service for the JLC report, arrest, injured prisoner, and evidence. And I'm on scene at 11th and Fair.
Baker 3, 2155.
Baker 71 headquarters. Baker 51 headquarters.
Baker 51.
I'm on scene for Jim.
Baker 51, 2208.
Baker 3 headquarters.
Units, Baker 3.
Either go.
Baker 23.
Let me ask you this one. Once Sergeant K says, I've got some resistance, I got a chick resisting or I got kick resisting, the officers hear that, they start stepping up their pace without really having to be told. Is that correct?
That's what they've said, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's
it's okay.
the right thing to happen, right?
Yes, sir.
You've got one officer that you know is on scene telling everybody else, I've got somebody resisting. That means getting it good.
Yes, sir.
You don't have to push the panic button. That is the panic button.
Yes, sir.
I've located these detained.
Don't mail detained at 2208.
Baker 69 headquarters.
Baker 69.
Going on team. Baker 3 headquarters.
Baker 3.
I'll be in service.
Baker 3.
Baker 1 headquarters.
Baker 1.
Christy Faye Gammon, fire contact. Christy
Headquarters, Baker 1.
Baker 1.
Christy Gammon, negative local area in chassis.
May I have arrest, please?
403-394158, 403-394158. 2015, 068 924, 068 924, at 2144, and in custody at 2150. Break. Reports 14-3292, 3292. Headquarters, Figure 3. Disturbance, Highland Heights Mobile Home Park, 2041 Russellville Road at lot 100, 100, Brent. The caller can only hear the incident, can hear several people yelling, at least one female and males on site. Can't advise further. Unknown weapons.
Baker 49 headquarters.
Units, Baker 3, go ahead. Baker 49, go ahead.
Transporting one female to jail.
Baker 49, 2215.
Baker 1 headquarters.
Baker 1.
Be around to the jail.
Baker 1, 2215.
Baker 35 headquarters.
Baker 35.
Has the report number already been assigned?
10 ports, 14-3292. Baker 1.
Baker 35 headquarters.
Baker 35.
I'm going to have an additional report for criminal mischief to the residents. 17 has evidence and will both be in service.
49 headquarters.
Baker 49.
There's some jail in service.
Baker 49, 2224.
148, you can disregard.
10 on 1 headquarters.
10 on 1.
In service.
10 on 1, 2224. Headquarters, Baker 35.
35, easy money.
Attempt to serve 1173 7th Street, 11737 7th Street. Received an anonymous tip on a Joseph Harp, 27-year-old white male, approximately 6'2", 250. He's on site this time, right? Does match for an active E warrant for flagrant non-sport.
10-4, what's the time delay from them calling?
45 minutes.
10-4.
49 headquarters.
Baker 49.
Around to bags and 10 and Clay.
Baker 49, 2225.
131 headquarters.
131.
Charlie 1, I received.
Charlie 1, 2225.
So is that all the radio traffic that you were able to obtain regarding this incident?
Yes, sir.
I would like to put the disc into evidence in the record.
Yes, sir.
As soon as I can get it to eject, I'll do that. It won't come out for some reason right this second. Fair to say you weren't out there on the scene and don't know exactly what was going on, correct?
No, sir, I was not.
And Sergeant K told you that the first two times she approached Miss Gammon, it was from the rear, correct?
I believe she said she, honestly, I don't remember how she said she approached her the first two times. But I don't think it was from the front.
And the last time she approached her from the front, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there were two people standing behind her, which would have been Mr. Allen and Mr. Campbell. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
It's smart of her not to get into a situation where she's going to let someone be able to get at one of her weapons, correct?
Every situation, yes, sir.
So if there are two people standing behind Miss Gammon, you don't fault Sergeant K from approaching her from the front.
They were all facing, the way I understand the situation, that they were there flanking each side of her. So if she were to come from the back, I wouldn't believe her weapons would be exposed if
they were on the sides and she came from the back,
If I-
her weapon would be exposed.
Okay, let me explain it. If I'm Miss Gammon and I have two people flanking me right here, you're not looking at me, so you don't see what I'm saying. Two people are looking at me like this. They're facing kind of me to help to get me to calm down. If somebody were to come from behind, it would be from behind them as well. So technically, that would be a good way to approach the situation.
Where were the other people?
I'm sorry?
Where was this crowd gathering? Do you know?
They were on the way that I understand it in the yards of the opposing sides of the street.
Did your investigation, did you talk to the Hubbards?
No, sir.
In your investigation, did you obtain any medical records?
The only medical records as far as like the exposure.
Medical records of Miss Gammon, excuse me.
No, I spoke with the jail nurse, and they had medical records there. But I just spoke with her. I did not obtain any medical records. No, sir.
And the nurse you spoke to said that Miss Gammon didn't complain about the complaints that she had when you talked to Miss Gammon, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Do you know what the detox period is for coming off of synthetic marijuana?
No, sir.
You spoke to Terry, is it Terry Lee or Terry Wayne Campbell? He was here earlier. You spoke to Mr. Campbell?
Yes, sir.
And you knew he was a convicted felon?
Yes, sir.
And did he also tell you that he had been drinking vodka?
The day I interviewed him?
Not the day you interviewed him, but the day that this happened.
No, sir.
He didn't tell you that?
No, sir.
Would that have made a difference as to whether or not you might believe what he has to say?
Well, I was not there at the time to speak with him, no. So I would have noted that he would have said he had been drinking, yes, but...
But when you interviewed him, he didn't tell you that the night that this happened that he had been drinking, did he?
No, sir.
Did you even ask him?
No, sir.
Was there a lady who you interviewed who said something to the effect that Christy was walking down the street saying, if anybody wants to F me, they better use a condom because I'm Hep C and HIV positive?
I believe the Hep C part, I don't believe that she had said the HIV, but she did say that she had been walking up and down the street.
Screaming that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe an officer has the right to protect themselves from getting a communicable disease?
Yes.
And when you say that this 10 code goes out, Sergeant K told you that she had heard this 10 code go out before about Christy Faye Gammon, meaning everybody on the force that heard it knew she had something that is communicable.
Correct.
And that could have been Hep C or AIDS or you name it, right?
Correct. It doesn't always have to be a disease. It could also be like if they have lice or bed bugs or, it's not necessarily just, but it's to use universal precautions. That's what it means.
And what universal precautions did the police department provide Sergeant K with?
She has gloves, and I'm not sure what all she keeps in her cruiser.
She had a spit mask.
I'm not sure.
Did the police department routinely issue spit masks?
I believe we have issued spit masks, whether or not Sergeant K had them in her time.
Are they issued to all officers?
They were, yes, sir.
When?
That I'm not sure.
Okay.
When I was a patrol officer and a patrol supervisor, we had them. But again, I have been off the street for 2 years, so I'm not sure what is in each cruiser now.
Sergeant K told you that she and Miss Gammon started having a civil conversation when they got to the jail, right?
Yes, she did.
Would you tell the commission about that?
Absolutely. She said that basically, I'll find it so I can make sure I quote it correctly. asked Sergeant K to describe the incident at the jail. Was Gammon indeed calm? Because apparently Owen had advised Sergeant K on her way out the door that quote, she was calm now. And I asked Sergeant K, was Gammon indeed calm? K advised physically yes, verbally no, as the jail staff had to tell her a time or two to be quiet. K advised Gammon was still cussing and was really hung up on this black and white thing. K advised the jail staff brought in an African-American male inmate, and the Gammon dropped the N-bomb on him while they were taking his picture. And of course, Sergeant K was some bitches and whores. That's what she said that Gammon had called her. Sergeant K advised as the jail staff was asking Gammon intake questions, K was taking photographs for her use of force report. K said sometimes she would ask Gammon a question and she would reply, F you. Other times she would do as she was asked for the picture, like look this way. She would be cooperative. K advised she didn't know what happened when she finally, and then she changed the subject talking about Mr. Reed and where she worked, and Kay advised Gammon kept accusing her of being a racist. Kay advised she told Gammon, my fiance is white and I don't care what anybody's color is. Kay said Gammon said with some thought, I believe you. Kay advised Gammon's demeanor completely changed and there was no more ill will. Kay was able to ask Gammon questions and have a typical conversation. Kay advised Gammon was even apologized and said, I should have done what you said. Kay advised it was like a light switch went off and Gammon was completely different.
Okay. And that's what Sergeant K told you just a few days after this happened when you interviewed her, right?
My interview with her was almost a month after this happened.
Okay. So why did you wait a month to interview her and not interview her right after you received her use of force report and had started to have concerns?
Right. I was assigned the internal affairs investigation. The chief had given me a phone call, and I was on vacation in Charlotte, and I got the phone call advising me that I would be assigned the internal affairs investigation on May the 6th. I was actually assigned the internal when I came back to work on May the 12th. So that was 10 days from the time I received it to the time I interviewed Sergeant K. And she was the last person I interviewed, so that is why.
But you do recognize, and everybody's entitled to vacation and that kind of thing. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't be on vacation, but I mean, obviously, nobody knew Sergeant K's story until almost a month later.
Well, she had had a chance and opportunity to write a written statement her first tour of duty back to work. So that was her opportunity to provide the chief and the command staff with her side of the story, if you will.
And even in that written statement, she advised that a lot of the same things she told you, and that Miss Gammon even was kicking at her at the time she made the decision to strike her.
Correct.
Sergeant K on duty there after Officer Owen took control of her. Officer K had a scene on her hands with several of her officers working underneath her, correct?
Yes, sir. And another sergeant.
And another sergeant. Did any of those officers, other than Miss Owen, get disciplined for not making sure that MedCom checked on Miss Gammon?
No, sir.
Why not?
They were at a different location around the back of 1101 Payne Street and had no contact or physical control over Miss Gammon.
And you interviewed a couple of people from EMS, correct?
Yes, sir.
And none of them told you that she said, don't treat Christy Gammon, correct?
Mr. Puckett advised that Sergeant K had said that there was nobody injured here and that nobody needed any help. But
Nope.
Not specifically, do not treat anybody. It was just according to what he said, a blanket statement saying there was nobody hurt here, nobody needs any help.
Okay. And did you file a complaint with EMS for not, I mean, they're on the scene, they're the medical people. Why didn't they walk up and check on her?
I don't know.
The police department's not in charge of EMS, are they?
No, no, sir.
I mean, the police department or police officer doesn't have the authority to tell them, don't check on somebody, right?
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
There's not a police officer on the Bowling Green Police Department that has the authority to tell MedCom to go away.
No, not specifically, no. But if the ambulance arrives on the scene, normally how a call for EMS arrives is the officer will call for an ambulance. Our dispatchers will ask, what do you need the ambulance for? Because when they call MedCom, they have to tell them what it's for. Sergeant K said she was even ready to tell them what she needed it for, but another officer, radio traffic, and dispatch never asked her what it was for. And the MedCom people normally ask our dispatchers, what do you need us for? And for some reason, their dispatchers did not ask either. So the dispatchers had somewhat of a breakdown as far as their communication goes. So when the officer, when the EMTs went to the scene, they really didn't know, other than they were going for a fight, what they were going for. Does that make sense? They weren't named a specific person. You're going to go see X or Y or what they were en route to.
The dispatchers weren't disciplined?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
Isn't it fair to say that if Sergeant K is out there on the scene and she turns around and looks and MedCom is either already gone, that maybe they looked at her and she didn't know, or because she was still kicking and flailing around, that she had refused medical treatment?
She put in there that that is what she said, that she didn't know, but she wasn't sure if Owen had sent them away or if they had just left because she turned around and they were gone. So she assumed by that she had refused.
And
that's what she put in her statement.
And that's why she put that in her statement, in her report.
She put in her report that she refused medical treatment. She did not put in her report the explanation of what.
She didn't say she assumed that.
Correct. She put that Gammon refused medical treatment.
And that's the basis for the allegation that she was untruthful in her report?
Yes, sir.
It's because she didn't say, I assumed that?
She did not explain it. She stated that she refused medical treatment.
She tried to explain that to you, though, when she got her oral interview about a month later, right?
That she said that she didn't know what happened and that she wasn't sure if Owen had given her the opportunity or what happened.
Now, it sounds like Sergeant K, when she became aware that she was maybe pregnant, did you ever find out if she was pregnant or not?
Actually, I think Sergeant K had said the nurses there said that they had asked her, and she said that she wasn't. And then Sergeant K had asked her, "Oh, I thought you said you were," and she said, "Well, you never know." That was her reply.
Did you ever follow up in your investigation and find out if she was really pregnant?
No, sir.
But it sounds like Sergeant K was concerned about this person enough that if she were pregnant, she didn't want to damage the baby, so she kept setting her up on her bottom.
That's what she said.
And she was concerned enough about her that she called for MedCom.
Correct.
And she was concerned enough about her at the jail that she actually took these pictures, didn't she?
Yes.
Captain Robinson didn't take the pictures at the jail.
No.
And she was concerned enough about her. She took and documented the injuries that she had from wherever they were from, correct?
Correct. By policy, she's supposed to.
And one of the things that she did so that the jail didn't have to take the pictures, she provided Captain Robinson at the jail with the pictures so that they didn't have to irritate and take her bandages off again.
Yes.
And cause her any further distress.
Correct.
So it sounds like Sergeant K was looking out for Christy Gammon's well-being overall.
Except for at the scene when she did not direct the medical staff there.
When people have this excited delirium, they have superhuman strength.
That's one of the characteristics, yes, sir.
And that's something that police officers are concerned about if someone has ingested drugs that they're not sure the nature of, correct?
Yes, sir.
So it was reasonable for Sergeant K to assume that Ms. Gammon may be experiencing this excited delirium and perhaps have this quote-unquote superhuman strength.
That's what she said in her initial report. She didn't document any excited delirium on any of her other paperwork, though.
Okay. But that's something that happens when you're on the scene like this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You don't think she's just making that up?
No, sir.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Milliken, do you have any follow-up?
Just a little, Your Honor. Major Bowles, the 911 calls, I had a hard time hearing that, but it seemed like there was somebody was saying they've got my son and some mention of some knives or something like that. Let me just ask you, were there any other arrests there that night as a result of when the other officers got there?
No, sir. No other arrests.
Did anybody ever find this man who was supposed to have been being held or taken or something like that?
He ran from that man was actually Miss Gammon's boyfriend, and he had ran and fled from the scene prior to police arrival.
So did anybody come to the police that night and say, I'm a victim, I was the one that called 911, I was the victim, or anybody make any complaints?
Not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
And so there were no other arrests?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Simpson asked you if an officer has a right to protect themselves from a communicable disease, and I believe you said that you do.
Absolutely.
Does punching a handcuffed prisoner who's on the ground in the face...
This is a direct question. Go ahead.
Does punching a handcuffed prisoner who's on the ground in the face protect you any way from exposure to communicable disease?
No, sir.
Does getting spit on give an officer the right to punch a handcuffed prisoner who's on the ground in the face?
No, sir.
Mr. Simpson asked you, nobody told you that Sergeant K sent the EMTs away, and I believe you said that Sergeant Puckett, or that the EMT Puckett relayed something to you, some things to you that Sergeant K had said. What did she say to him?
She had said that there was nobody injured and nobody needed any help.
Okay. Did you discuss that with Sergeant K?
I'm not sure that I had said those exact words.
Okay. So no question, though, that Sergeant K was the one that called them to begin with, right?
Correct.
And if when they got there she said nobody's injured, nobody needs help, what would that, in your mind, what would that tell the EMTs?
That there's nobody that needed their attention. Basically, I asked Kay if she had directed EMTs to Christy Gammon. After a pause, Kay advised, I can't remember. I don't know if I did or if Michelle did. I asked the EMT if the EMTs talked to Gammon. Kay advised, I have no idea because I went over to the back of 1101 Payne to see what was going on. I again stated to Kay, you specifically called for EMS and never. Kay interrupted and said, no, I can't even remember EMS getting on scene. And I stated again, but you never directed them or told them why they were called to the scene. Kay said no. And I stated, you're not even sure that they talked to her, meaning Gammon. And I said, your statement stated Gammon refused to be transported by MedCom to the medical center, but was transported to the jail by Officer Owen. Kay advised that was an assumption because they drove off. I asked Kay if she had observed the EMTs go back to their ambulance and get a clipboard for the person to resign a refusal. Kay didn't answer the question at the time, but advised she had distanced herself from Gammon once Owen arrived on the scene. She advised later that she never saw EMS with clipboards or anybody signing any paperwork.
Okay. So Sergeant K never told you that she told EMS nobody's injured, nobody needs help?
No, sir.
That's what EMS told you that she'd said?
EMT Puckett, yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Simpson was asking you if Sergeant K was... well, that's all. That's all I have. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up, Mr. Simpson?
When did you interview Mr. Puckett?
Can I get my...
Sure. And I may be able to tell you.
So you have the scene.
I do.
May 21st, does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
Witness, step over here. We'll share a mic. Bring that
Okay.
wireless mic with you, if you don't mind. Grab that wireless microphone. I'm going to. And just
What
pick
is it
up
that
in-
you're showing her, Mr. Simpson?
Did you obtain copies of the photographs of the glob of saliva on Officer K's uniform?
Yes, sir.
And is this a photograph? Is this a close-up of that?
Yes, sir. Appears to be.
And there are a series of photographs that were taken that night by law enforcement to
Sergeant Porter.
Sergeant Porter took, and some of them are on this disc for whatever reason turned sideways. How would you describe this glob of? Well, you just describe it. I'll quit describing it.
It's on her name side plate, and basically
Let me turn this towards
kind of like
you.
a quarter size. Say probably a quarter size right here on her uniform shirt.
That's a pretty good chunk of spit, isn't it?
Appears to be, yes.
Okay. And do you know if she was trying to spit in her face and it just happened to land there, or do you think she was trying to hit her in the pocket?
I have no idea.
Okay. And I mentioned earlier that there was a...
Do you still need me up here?
You can sit back down, I think. Take that with you if you want to. You mentioned earlier that there was a video of her in the back of the car. Did you watch that?
I did.
And how would you describe Miss Gammon's behavior in the back of the police car?
At first, you could just see her because it was kind of blurry at first because she was. I'm not familiar with Officer Owen's car, but you could just see her sitting in the back and they had the window down, and she was talking to somebody as as Officer Owen was transporting Gammon to the jail. You would just probably describe her as upset, and she was crying at one point, making some weird comments about different things, but
There was an older lady talking to her, trying to calm her down.
yes,
Do you know who that lady was?
I do.
And who was that?
Her name escapes me right this second. That was Peggy Bailey.
Let me ask you if...
I think it works very well.
Let me ask you to step over here, and I don't have a cord that's long enough, and the battery apparently has gone dead on this, but I want you to tell me if this is the video. We can sort of face the commissioners.
Yes.
If you want to come over here on this side, and we'll play it for them. Does this look like the in-car video?
It is.
All right.
Your Honor, I object based on the irrelevance.
I'll go ahead and let it in.
You say there's no sound at first? Is that correct?
Yeah, because there's just crying.
All right, let me see if I can make sure we got the volume turned up too. It's up there. I'm going to have my trusty assistant come over here and fix this because I think I asked her to turn it down earlier. Try Okay. So there's no audio at first, but then it starts. Is that right?
I think when she starts actually driving, she's talking. She's obviously crying.
Is there any blood on her head?
Something there. I don't know if it's blood.
Can't tell if it's blood or bruising. Is it safe to say that the rest of this is just static picture of the back of the car, and the commission doesn't need to watch that? All right. Thank you. Return to your seat. Did you ever go back and interview? Did you ever go back and interview Christy's father?
No, sir. No, sir.
Even after you heard that she may have been thrown off the front porch?
No, sir.
Did you ever go back and interview her boyfriend who she had supposedly been into a fight with?
No, sir.
So you can't say for sure, based upon your investigation, of where her injuries came from?
That is correct.
Okay. I would like to introduce the disc of the dispatch and radio traffic, and then also this disc as well, is our next two lettered exhibits. And I have no further questions.
Anything, that'd be fine. Anything else, Mr. Milliken?
I don't believe so.
Thank you, Ms. Bowles. We appreciate you coming in testifying.
May she be finally excused.
Do you have any other issues for her? It might
I
take.
think she probably ought to remain on standby, only because it depends on if there's a second part of this hearing. There will be some issues that come up that she may have to address.
We'll let you know if you need to get back here, but remind you that please don't discuss your testimony or watch the remainder of the hearing on TV. Who's your next witness?
Khalil Flesher, Your Honor.
Khalil.
Are you spelling it last name?
F-L-E-S-C-H-E-R.
Yes, sir.
S-H-E-R.
Your Honor, I neglected to, but I moved the introduction of Major Bowles' summary report of the audio recorded interview. His petitioner's next numbered exhibit.
Mayor, it's 18 pages long, and I think she hit
17.
the highlights. 17 pages long. I think she hit the highlights. I think just putting a report in wholesale causes problems, but I'll obviously have to leave it to your discretion. But
I'll allow it to be entered. Sergeant Flesher, please have a seat right there in front of the microphone. Would you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Well, thank you, sir. Please have a seat. State your name, rank, and business address.
I'm
Your
sorry.
name, rank, and business address.
Anton Khalil Flesher, Sergeant, Illinois Police Department.
Mr. Milliken.
Thank you. Sergeant Flesher, what is your title there at the, I understand you're a sergeant there, but what are you responsible for there at the
Training.
moment? For training. I want to ask you some questions about use of force training in particular, okay? What is the Bowling Green Police Department's policy and on use of force and when use of force can be used and those things? Can you tell the commission about that generally?
Yeah, it can be very complicated, but in general use of force, basically, we train the officers to use the minimum amount of force necessary to effect an arrest and control the person who's being arrested.
Okay. What types of force do you train them on?
Okay. There is basically your officer presence, escorting techniques, striking, soft empty hand strikes, which is punching, kicking, kneeing. Also taser, baton, OC, just basically the entire use of force continuum, all the way up to using deadly force.
That's the word I was looking for and I couldn't think of, the use of force continuum. Can you explain what that is, please?
Yes, sir. The use of force continuum, basically, it gives you an idea of all the things that the officer has at their disposal and try to control the situation. And basically, it's broken down. Some people look at it as like a ladder that you can only do one before you do the next, and that's not really so much as the case. It's more of these are what the officer has the ability to use, depending on the situation, and then there's reasons why you would use one over the other. There's a variety of things. One reasons we have a uniform, professional appearance. Just officers showing up as officer presence is considered level 1 of the use of force continuum. Followed by that is your verbal commands, directives as an officer that you would give requesting information from a person. Third, you got what you considered soft escorting techniques, pain compliance, like grabbing hold of a person who doesn't want to go. After that, we have OC at our discretion. We have tasers. After that, you have hard, empty hand, and I guess the best way to understand that is strikes, using your fist, just like you consider a fight. In progression, you also have you have your baton, which is an intermediate use of force, the batons that officers carry. And follow up by that, that's going to be, the next level would be your deadly force, would be your firearms.
Okay. So what I call punching somebody, that's what you mean by hard,
empty hand.
Hard, empty hand. That means you're punching them with your fist. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right?
Yes.
And so on the continuum, the way I'm understanding it, it starts out with here.
Objection to the leading.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand. I haven't suggested any answer to him. What I'm understanding is it goes from less serious to more serious. Is that accurate generally? In terms of the force the degree of force you use.
Correct. You could describe it as going from the least invasive or least possibility of inflicting harm or injury, all up to obviously your firearms, the deadly force. It's the most severe.
Okay. And where does closed or hard hand strikes lie in that continuum?
If you basically presence, your officer's presence, verbal command, soft empty hand, then you got tasers and OC at your disposal, hands on or strikes. So above that, you have your baton and you have deadly force,
okay,
which is your firearm.
Did Sergeant K receive the department training on use of force?
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware of the factual circumstances concerning this disciplinary proceeding?
I am.
And what's your understanding of the allegations against Sergeant K?
As I know them to be,
Yes, sir.
it was explained to me that...
Can we find out who explained it to him first?
Sure. Who explained it to you?
Major Bowles.
Okay. And what did Major Bowles tell you that this was about?
Major Bowles explained to me the situation that Sergeant K was dealing with an intoxicated person. She was handcuffed. There was a statement that she said she was pregnant. She sat her on a curb or sat her down. There's a couple people around her. Was called an ambulance or was trying to call someone to get them there. She went back to where the lady was who was under arrest, who was handcuffed. And I can't recall quite, but she was moving around or something where she wanted her to quit moving. As Sergeant K approached, she started kicking at Sergeant K. And she spit on Sergeant K. Sergeant K then punched her in the face.
Okay. Based on your understanding of the facts, as you've just stated, and you being the one responsible for the training on use of force with the officers, were Sergeant K's actions in compliance with the Bowling Green Police Department policy?
May I make an objection, Your Honor? First objection would be is that in the witness and exhibit list, Sergeant Khalil Flesher was listed as witness number 22 by the city, by Mr. Milliken. And he stated that his testimony is expected to testify regarding training, policies, and standards of the Bowling Green Police Department as applied to the incident in question. Never disclosed that he was going to testify as an expert on the policies of the city of Bowling Green. And was never disclosed that he may offer an opinion as an expert as to whether or not there was a violation of the policy. In addition to that, I don't think if Your Honor is considering allowing him to answer the question, I don't think he's laid a proper foundation as to his qualifications to render such an opinion. He's not disclosed as an expert witness, I can assure you. And I'd say one other thing. I think it's up to you all to decide if the policies were violated.
Well, a couple of things here. I think that if you want to maybe ask a few more questions about his training and qualifications and what he does for the police department, I don't think he has to be an expert to testify about the policies of the police department. I would hope that every police officer would be able to testify about the policies of the police department without needing an expert to do that. But if he is the training officer, I think he's got the ability to answer those questions about whether, in his opinion, this use of force complied with the policies of the city of Bowling Green. If he is, in fact, one of our main training officers, which may want to do is maybe ask a couple more questions, give a little more in about what his position is with the police department.
I can do that. I can lay more of a foundation. Can you
Well,
explain?
it still doesn't address the fact that he was not disclosed as an expert witness.
I'm asking him just exactly
I
what
think
I
we're supposed
put
to
on.
direct our
I'm
comments
asking
to
him
the
just
mayor.
exactly what I put on the witness statement. I mean, that's what I'm asking him.
When you read the witness statement, I went back and was reading along with you. We fully expect the training officer to tell what he has been training the officers to do.
And I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with him saying, and in addition to that, I'm going to testify that she violated those policies, and it doesn't say that in this disclosure.
It says as applied to the
Let's get to that
incident.
point before I make a ruling on that part of it. Let's qualify him as the training officer and what training he has to provide this information.
Can you answer that question? What qualifies you to train these officers on policy?
Okay, I have been trained in PPCT, pressure point control tactics from the Department of Criminal Justice Training, which is the use of force, the accepted use of force, documentation. Also been trained in ASP batons. I'm also a firearms instructor through a Department of Criminal Justice Training. Received my training from them as well. So we're all through the police academy.
How long have you been a police officer?
19 years.
How long have you had this position where you're in charge of training for the police officers?
7 years.
He's training them on the use of them, not when to use them, but how to use them. That's what he just said.
Sergeant, did you attend the instructor's class? Have you attended the instructor's class?
Yes, I'm a PPCT instructor.
As part of that instruction, in any weapon or use of force, does that instruction include when and when not to use those weapons?
Yes.
Okay, you can continue.
And if I may say, the use of force continuum, obviously it's in our policy and procedure, it's a guide. Because it's in our use of force continuum, it's important, and one of my main jobs is to make officers aware what is appropriate and how in fact they can use certain techniques and what is appropriate.
If you would, when your testimony, please be careful to allow us the discretion to make the determination whether or not somebody violated policy. But I'm going to allow you a lot of freedom to answer the question if it's carefully worded.
Yes, sir.
To avoid placing him in that conclusory position.
Is there anyone else who occupies a similar position as you in the police department, or are you the one that has that position?
There are other members of the training unit. There's 3 of us, another
Okay.
sergeant and a captain. Of the 3 of us, I'm the primary defensive tactics instructor for the department. And that's my area of expertise.
All right. Then, as the primary instructor on defensive tactics, do you have any issues with Sergeant K's conduct on the night in question as you understand it to be?
Same objection. He just asked the question you told him he couldn't ask.
Your Honor, if I may, and I'm sorry I addressed Mr. Simpson directly, but I disclosed this witness and said Sergeant Flesher is expected to testify regarding training, policies, and standards of the Bowling Green Police Department as applied to the incident in question. Now, that's just as plain English as I know how to make it. I don't see how there could be any surprise regarding that I want to ask him about whether there are issues with his conduct violating the policy.
Give me just a second. Mr. Simpson, Mr. Milliken, I'm going to ask the question. The incident that you have been informed about, the training that you apply to every member of the Bowling Green Police Department and situations, what would your training lead you to train officers when encountering a situation similar to what you have been told about this encounter?
The person who's handcuffed, basically to roll them over, get behind them, and not let them spit on me.
Is any part of the training that you have been taught or that you teach to any officer in the Bowling Green Police Department include striking a handcuffed prisoner?
Yes.
Would you explain when that might occur?
Yes. An example would be if a person's handcuffed but not in control, they're standing, you're trying to escort them, they're kicking you, pulling away from you and trying to gain control, trying to break free from you. Knee strikes to the common peroneal, which is the thigh area.
Say that again.
Knee strikes to the common peroneal, which is a nerve cluster in your side of your thigh. Those are acceptable to try to gain control of the person. But this person would be in an upright position, and that would be acceptable technique to use. You person who's handcuffed, but you don't truly have control of that person.
Now let me follow and make sure I understand that you're telling me that it is acceptable under Bowling Green Police training to strike a handcuffed prisoner
who is not under control.
And the not under control that you defined in that situation is upright, kicking you, pulling away, trying to get away. Did
Yes.
I hear that correctly?
Yes.
What would be your training as based on your experience and what you've been taught with regard to a handcuffed prisoner in a sitting position who you believe not to be in control and kicking at you?
If I don't believe that person is a flight risk, try to control them by basically soft, empty hand, holding their body in a position in which they can't escape. I'm trying to understand the question correctly, Mayor, and answer that as best I can.
Well, let me ask it again and make sure that in a training situation for any Bowling Green police officer where you have an individual who is handcuffed but is still kicking and spitting, and as an officer you don't believe is under control, how do you train them to respond to that situation?
In that situation, the only way a person's sitting, I could see them sitting in the back of a cruiser and trying to get them into the car, and they will not. They're blocking the car door. Obviously, we teach restraint, trying to talk to the person, try to do everything but the last thing to actually put hands on them, to actually have to use force, if you will. That's absolutely going to be the last resort. It's not the first resort in that situation. Trying to get them in a car in a sitting position that's kicking, that's occurred numerous times that I have remembered on patrol. We've used that. We've used pressure points, which is considered soft empty hand. For those who don't know what that is, it's basically putting a pain compliance at certain nerve clusters on your temple or right behind the ear or right underneath the jaw to try to get a pain compliance to get the person to get in the back of a car. And obviously, if that doesn't work, you can do a knee strike to the common peroneal to get pain compliance to get the person to move their leg inside the car door so you can close the door and take them to jail. The whole thing is it's not the first reaction. The first thing is try to be patient and have that person to comply. Obviously the last thing we want to do is have to use force.
Okay. You'll probably get asked some additional questions. Please remember that it's our decision whether or not somebody has violated policy.
Yes, sir.
Just keep that in mind. Mr. Milliken, would you like to continue?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Simpson, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. Sergeant, the use of force continuum is in your policies and procedures manual is 3.1.6.2. Does that sound about right?
It's 3 point something, sir.
It's under the use of force section?
Yes.
And
there's a picture on there as well.
There's a picture of a police officer in a hat and uniform and...
Yes, sir.
All right. And it goes from 1 to 13, correct?
Yes, sir.
And 1 is an officer just showing up on the scene.
Yes, sir.
And theoretically, a sane, unintoxicated person, that would have some effect on them immediately anyway, correct?
That's our hope, yes.
And then, of course, it goes all the way to number 13, and that is lethal force, and the only thing at that point is firearms, correct?
Yes.
And you started talking about that there is training on punching.
Yes.
And does that fall under category number 7, decentralization?
Decentralization strikes, yes.
Decentralization, and then I think I highlighted it on my copy. Heavy techniques of subject control.
Yes.
This is a nice way of, it doesn't say punching, but that's what that means, right?
Yes, yes.
It's kind of a watered-down version of, it's a polite way of saying it.
It is striking, yes.
And so on the use of force continuum, punching someone is about halfway down, correct?
It's number 7 out of 13 approximately, yes.
And using any kind of spray, I guess OC is number 5. Is that, yes?
I don't have it from, basically from memory.
I'll walk over there, I'm sorry. I'm a little tethered here, so bear with me. On the use of force continuum, OC spray is number 5, is that correct?
That's correct.
And then a taser is number 6.
Yes.
All right, now let me back up just a second. If you know that someone has a communicable disease, the last thing you want on you is probably their saliva or, for lack of a better way of saying it, snot, any kind of bodily fluid. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so OC spray has an immediate response of causing a person to salivate, their nose to run, their eyes to tear up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And a taser also can cause a person to fall, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that Ms. Gammon was claiming to Sergeant K that she was pregnant?
Yes.
So you wouldn't necessarily want to tase a pregnant woman?
No.
Okay, and there's nothing to indicate that Sergeant K punched Ms. Gammon in the stomach, correct?
Correct.
All right. So on the use of force continuum, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was using, number 10 is a baton rounds. Does that mean hitting someone with a baton?
No, sir. That's some less lethal for specialized training.
All right. Where does the ASP or...
That's their intermediate force. That's number 12, sir.
That's number 12?
Yes.
Are you telling... Well, so what you're saying is there would be a situation where someone is handcuffed and out of control, and you could go to number 12. The baton, hitting them in the side of the leg. Is that what you were talking about earlier?
No, using your knee.
Using your knee?
Yes, sir.
And kneeing them in the leg?
Yes.
Okay. And you would agree that whether a person uses whatever level of force they use has to be based upon what the officer is faced with right there on the scene. Agree?
That when they're based on their training and experience.
And it's always easy to be the Monday morning quarterback, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it is.
Are you familiar with that area of town?
I don't know where that. I don't know the
You
address.
don't even know where it happened? Did you review any of the interviews that were conducted, or did you just get your information only from Major Bowles?
My information from Major Bowles.
Did you read her investigative report or anything?
No, it did not.
And I think perhaps you said it best earlier, is that the use of force continuum, and when you have to use force on someone who's under arrest, can be very complicated.
Yes.
Requires you to make split-second decisions
Yes.
under very stressful circumstances.
Yes.
Did Major Bowles tell you that this individual, Miss Gammon, was kicking at Sergeant K when she struck her?
So she explained to me that she was kicking at Sergeant K. Yes.
While she was handcuffed?
Yes.
And that after that, that Sergeant K struck her?
Correct.
But that she was actively kicking and resisting at that time?
Kicking.
Okay. Do you know if she was sitting down on her rear end, or was she laying back on her back kicking?
I don't recall that.
You said one of the things that you would prefer to do is to try to reason with someone. And some people you can talk to, right?
Correct.
And some people who are really drunk and or really high, you try to reason with them and they just can't be reasoned with. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And that's been your experience as a patrol officer as well?
Yes.
And so, to summarize your testimony, there are circumstances where someone is handcuffed and where the officers are trained that it is okay to strike them with their fist even if they're handcuffed.
I didn't say with their fist, their knee.
Only their knee?
Yeah.
Do you think that someone spitting hepatitis C into someone's face is an assault on a police officer?
Objection. Misstates the evidence.
I beg your pardon?
He said spit in someone's face.
Well, I think she tried to spit in her face, Your Honor. I think she just missed.
You can answer the question.
Do you think that someone trying to spit hepatitis C on someone's face or on their body on a police officer is an assault on a police officer?
Yes.
No further questions.
Mr. Milliken?
Is punching a handcuffed prisoner who is on the ground, is that an assault?
I think so, yes.
Okay. Assume for a moment that the facts are she's handcuffed, she's on the ground, she's belligerent drunk. Is belligerence or drunkenness ever, according to your training, is that ever an acceptable reason to punch a handcuffed person in the face because they're belligerent and yelling and screaming?
No.
If they're on the ground, drunk, handcuffed, and they're kicking and yelling, does that give the officer a legitimate reason to punch them in the face?
No.
If they yell racial slurs at the officer while they're on the ground, handcuffed, kicking and screaming, is that a justification for the officer punching them in the face?
No.
That's all.
But if an officer is being assaulted, it's okay for the officer to defend themselves, correct?
Correct.
No further questions.
Is that all for Mr. Flesher?
That's all.
Anybody else have any questions for clarification? You're dismissed and instruct you not to discuss your testimony with anyone else until
Yes.
after the hearing. Your next witness is?
It's going to be the chief. Could we take a 5-minute break?
I heard amen up here, so we'll take 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. To the hearing, Mr. Milliken, I believe you're calling Chief Hawkins to the stand. He'll assume the position.
I think Mr. Simpson wants to introduce something.
Yes. You wanted to introduce that?
Are we back on?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, Your Honor, the Sergeant Flesher's testimony, we've discussed the use of force continuum. He referred to that. I would like to have that placed in the record, and we've made a copy to do so. I'd like to have that as my next marked exhibit. I think I'm letters, not numbers. I don't know.
So entered. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please have a seat. Give us your name, rank, and business address, please.
Doug Hawkins, Chief of Police, Bowling Green Police Department, 911 Kentucky Street, Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Mr. Milliken.
Chief, how long have you been the chief of police?
Just short of 8 years.
And how long have you been a police officer?
Just short of 25 years.
You've been present here in the chambers and heard all of the testimony, is that correct?
I have.
And I believe that you, as the chief, well, let me just ask you this: what was your first involvement in this incident? Let's just start with that.
As is fairly typical, I will get first notice of issues like this from subordinate staff. In this case, Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Wiles brought it to my attention. He had been notified by Major Melanie Watts, if I'm not mistaken, who had been notified by Captain Brian Harrell, who we heard from earlier today. And so it sort of climbed through the chain of command and came to my attention fairly quickly. I knew about it prior to Danica Kay's return to work on that Tuesday. So I was probably aware of it on that Monday prior to her returning to work on that Tuesday. So that would have been my first notice of it.
All right. What was the first department document that you reviewed in connection with it, if you recall?
I don't know if I saw her written statement that she produced on that Tuesday, or if I saw the use of force. They were both within a short period of time from one another, probably not simultaneously, but within a short period of one another. So,
and basically, and I know, tell the commission what she reported on the use of force and what you did as a result of that report.
The thing, as has been mentioned by other witnesses, that struck me, and I don't mean that to sound cute or funny, was the fact that there was an admission in the use of force by Danica Kay as to her punching the handcuffed prisoner while she laid on the ground. I mean, that on the surface doesn't sound good. Admittedly, that's not a good set of facts as it was first reported on the use of force report.
Okay. What did you do after you reviewed the use of force report and or her narrative where she explained that that's what she did?
Mayor,
Sir.
And I don't mean any disrespect to the chief, but Major Bowles did the investigation and handed it off to him. He didn't do any of the interview, so I perhaps in saving time, I don't know what he can add to what's been said about what actually occurred out there. I mean, he can say, I told everybody to investigate it. I'll stipulate to that he told everybody to investigate it, and it was investigated. I mean, I don't know, quite frankly, what he can add to this other than he told everybody to be investigated, and he told the city attorney he wanted to prefer charges. I'll stipulate that he did all of those things.
Are we trying to get something specific that
Well,
we can get to?
Of course, there's a saying in the law that the other side you can't let the other side stipulate away your case, and I'm entitled to prove the case the way I want to, but I'm trying to establish, number one, that he initiated the investigation, and frankly, what his conclusions were as a result of the investigation. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get to.
I think those are reasonable questions, so go ahead.
So what did you do in connection, after you read the use of force reports and the narratives, what action did you take?
It was clear to me even early on that unless there was some factual change that I was unaware of when I first became made aware of this situation, that we were likely going to need an internal investigation to fully flesh out the facts of this incident. There were 3 documents ultimately that came before me before I ultimately made that decision. One was the use of force report. Actually, I probably at that point had Michelle Owen's supplemental use of force report. I had the both written statements from Danica Kay and from Michelle Owen, and I also had the conduct form, which was completed by Captain Brian Harrell. Those 5 documents in hand, there was no compelling information in any of those documents that made me believe that use of force was justifiable. And so I was compelled at that point to ask staff to conduct an internal investigation in order to determine factually, was there other information that wasn't made available in those 5 documents? And if there was new information, would it be compelling to suggest that the use of force was justifiable? And so I asked Major Penny Bowles to conduct that internal investigation.
And you heard her testimony about the investigation she conducted?
Yes.
And then she submitted the results of that to you as the chief, is that correct?
That's correct.
Based on your review of that investigation, as conducted by Penny Bowles, as the chief of police, what are your conclusions?
Objection. I think the ultimate conclusions have to be drawn by the city commission and not by the police chief. He's asking him the exact question you haven't allowed anyone else to answer.
I understand he has a special responsibility as this department head to make a conclusion, to make that recommendation to the commission, and I want to hear what he's got to say on it.
May I make one other objection just for the record?
Sure.
I understand you're going to let him do that.
Mm-hmm.
Witness 21, Chief Doug Hawkins. This is in Mr. Milliken's essentially pretrial compliance. Chief Hawkins is expected to testify regarding the policies and standards of the Bowling Green Police Department and his actions taken as chief in response to the incident in question. It doesn't say that he's going to offer any opinions about it.
I understand, and I think there's ways you can ask that question that meets the standard that you've laid out here.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
You were preparing your next question, weren't you?
I was thinking when you were talking to me. I apologize.
I think there are ways you can ask the question and elicit the answer that you're looking for without asking specifically for his conclusion.
Well, I can try to ask it another way, Your Honor. What did you determine as a result of the investigation?
I think it's incumbent upon the chief in our department to be the finder of fact, and or make some determination with respect to the fact of a particular situation. I think only if I'm allowed to do that am I then allowed to come to some conclusion as to whether a policy were violated or not, in order then to make some reasonable and rational decision regarding discipline. That's my role as chief, is to maintain discipline in the organization, and so I believe that I have that responsibility to be a determiner of fact and make some judgment on the violation of policy, if there is, and then what the appropriate discipline might be. So there's a process, and in this case, the investigation was compelling in that there was never any information in the evidence presented in the case itself, which obviously is the document that I have to make a judgment on with respect to this incident. If, in fact, the excessive use of force was the ultimate determination, that's a serious charge against any police officer. And so I didn't take that responsibility lightly as to ultimately what punishment would be appropriate. And frankly, I thought it was prudent to get a number of people to engage in the discussion about the facts of this case because I thought it would be helpful to have multiple points of view, multiple perspectives, if you will, regarding this case. I know everybody looks at this from a different angle, and so I thought it was prudent if ultimately the recommendation was going to be termination. I wanted to feel like I had gathered all of the opinions, all of the informed, educated opinions about this particular investigation.
Do you feel like you did that in this case?
I do. I believe we were thorough both in the investigation and in our assessment of the investigation.
And what is your assessment?
After reviewing the details of the case with a number of the senior command staff, it was a unanimous conclusion.
Objection to the hearsay, unless we know who the senior staff is, unless they're going to testify. I think I'm entitled to know who that is. I can't.
I can name them if you'd like.
That's not
He
necessary.
can't say
It
what
all
they
comes
said.
down to your decision, even though you consulted
Ultimately,
with the
I
rest
made
of
the decision with certainly the input from other senior command staff as well as other members of city government. And there was a determination made that policy had been violated, that state law had been violated, and the appropriate punishment based on the facts of the case indicated that termination was the appropriate discipline, the appropriate punishment in this case.
And why is that?
I mean, I really need to go into a long-handed explanation about sort of how I came to that conclusion based on the facts of the case, only because I didn't take it lightly. I lived with this case and have lived with it for months and have poured over and over in my head the relevant facts. One of the things that's important in this case in particular to determine is, was the use of force justified? Because I think the seminal issue here is the alleged use of force by Danica Kay against Christy Gammon. So there's been a lot of testimony entered that really is peripheral to the key issue here, with two key issues. One was the use of force. The other was related to the denial of medical treatment. So in my mind, the questions that had to be answered were, A, was the use of force justified? And if use of force was justified, was the level of force applied appropriate in this situation? The facts that I think are undisputed, or perhaps even disputed, but from my perspective, Christy Gammon in a handcuffed, seated, or laying down position, albeit throwing a tantrum, albeit drunk and disorderly, laying there in the street, was not an active threat to anybody. She was a passive threat. She was laying there, and unless you were in her circumference, you were not in danger. Nobody was in danger unless you put yourself in danger by getting too close to her. So she was a passive threat at best. The way I characterize it is Christy Gammon laying there on the ground, handcuffed, cussing, throwing a fit, was equivalent to a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. They were laying on their backs, they were kicking their feet, they were screaming, they were cussing. Hopefully 5-year-olds don't cuss, but in this case, Christy was cussing. And there was no compelling reason, based on the facts of the investigation as presented to me, there were no compelling reason for, other than Christy's continued behavior, for Danica Kay to approach her from the front to address any particular concern, because this was ongoing behavior. But if she was going to approach her, certainly from the back would have been the more appropriate approach. Tactically, there were many mistakes made by Danica Kay in this entire situation. Not sure they're relevant to the facts of how she treated Christy Gammon, but Christy Gammon, in my assessment, didn't present an immediate active threat to anybody. The standard in KRS for the use of force, I think, is threefold. One is in an arrest situation, when an officer is trying to take a person into custody, we are required to use the minimum force necessary. You've heard those terms in testimony earlier today. The minimum force necessary to take into custody. We can also use force to protect ourselves or others from assault. So, with respect to whatever that assault looks like, we can use force to stop that assault to protect somebody else. And we can also use force to protect from someone escaping from us. And I think Sergeant Flesher talked about if you have somebody actively trying to pull away from you, you can use a common peroneal strike to prevent that escape. I didn't see in the facts presented to me where the arrest had already been completed. This is not an issue of arrest. The arrest had already been effected. She was handcuffed. She was laying on the ground. So this is not pertinent to the arrest component of the 3 times when force is approved to be used. To protect self or others from assault is what some are suggesting that this is justified under. The third is preventing escape. I don't think anybody has suggested, nor do I think the evidence suggests, that Christy Gammon was ever trying to escape the scene. So the minimum to arrest is a non-issue because this is not an arrest situation. The preventing escape, in my mind, is a non-issue because we don't have any evidence in the case or presented here today that suggests that Christy was trying to escape. The third was this situation a force necessary to protect from assault. In this particular situation, when examining the facts, the officer, Danica Kay, made a poor choice and put herself in a position, and I don't even know that there is evidence that's been presented either in the case or in testimony that suggests she actually was kicked, but that she was either potentially kicked or even a graze of a kick. There was no evidence presented in the case that I think a direct hard kick was ever initiated against Sergeant Kay. But if she put herself in a position to be kicked, it was a mistake to be there in the first place. It was a poor choice on Danica Kay's part to even be there because she had a choice, a 360-degree approach angle. The two gentlemen that were, by testimony on either side of Christy Gammon laying on the ground, could have and should have been ordered to move away from her. And the evidence shows if Danica Kay had bothered to look around, she would have seen Michelle Owen, who was in her immediate area, was there to assist her. She didn't make use of that tool, if you will, of having another officer there to assist in moving those people away from Christy Gammon, or to even ask Officer Owen to assist her in controlling Christy Gammon. So if you accept the fact, which I think, and I would put it to you like this, and I thought of it in these terms. Christy Gammon's a passive threat because she's kicking, she's flailing around on the ground, but she's not a danger to anybody. If I stand on the side of the road and watch cars pass, cars are a passive threat. If I step out in front of that car and put myself in harm's way, does that then justify me in using force to protect myself? Putting that analogy into this situation, if Danica Kay put herself in harm's way and then used that to justify force, is that reasonable? So the question is, was force justifiable? You have to believe that it was okay for her to step into that circle of danger, if you will, in order to make the force justifiable. I don't believe that was necessary. I believe that was an unnecessary action by Danica Kay to put herself in harm's way, that then she uses that to justify force against Christy Gammon. But even if you accept the fact that that's just part of police work, sometimes you're at the wrong place at the wrong time, and you get yourself in a situation where you are now in harm's way. Then I had to ask myself the question, was the force, if justifiable, which in my mind is not, but if it was justifiable, is hitting her multiple times in the head with a closed fist the proper response to protecting herself from assault, as law suggests we have? Protecting ourselves from assault is punching multiple times in the head with a closed fist, with as testimony has said, with Christy Gammon's head against the ground, with her hair being held with one hand while she's being punched with the other. Is that reasonable and justifiable given the circumstance of being kicked, grazed with a kick, or almost kicked? The threat of assault, or having minor contact with a kicking, violent person on the ground. So none of that seemed reasonable to me. She shouldn't have been where she was, but the fact is she was. She got spit on, which at the time in testimony the case certainly suggested, and testimony has suggested that she got spit on. You had a witness earlier today, which was part of the investigation, that says she became enraged when she got spit on. She wasn't enraged because Christy Gammon was trying to kick at her, but that she became enraged, and at the moment she got spit on was when she moved in to apply the force, which in this case we know is multiple closed fist strikes to the head of a handcuffed prisoner laying on the ground. There's nothing in my mind as chief that makes that okay. Given the facts of this situation, I can't find any way to make it okay for Sergeant Kay to have used this level of force, even if she felt threatened by the kick, even if she felt like she had to defend herself from being kicked. The use of force has to be similar, equivalent, a reasonable to protect yourself. I don't know that multiple fist strikes were the appropriate response, even if you assume that the being in harm's way was an accident, not her fault, or serendipity. She was just where she was, and she was in harm's way. So, in a determination of the facts of this case, I don't think force was justifiable. Consequently, I think any force used beyond just passively securing her, pushing her legs to the side, and frankly approaching her from a different angle than from the front to begin with, would have been the better way to deal with the kicking legs. The being spat upon, even if infected, which we don't know that factually, the report, the evidence suggests Danica Kay didn't know what Christy Gammon was infected with until she got to the jail. It was an after-the-fact knowledge that she knew she was infected with hepatitis. So you can't suggest that the justification for being spat upon is an assault because we didn't have those facts at hand at the time of the assault. So simply being spat upon is not an assault. Even if you want to argue an infected spit, maybe if you want to stretch that to an assault, but we didn't know that factually. Danica Kay didn't know that factually. She knew that she had a flailing, drunk, belligerent, handcuffed prisoner laying on the ground who only exposed people to danger that were in her circumference. She then knows she got spat on her shirt. Whether Christy was aiming at her face, I think is irrelevant. She got spat toward. It happened to hit her. That, in and of itself, with the facts in the case, are not justifiable for the use of force. In my mind, with respect to the use of force, these are the pertinent facts, and there is nothing in them that suggests to me that this is justifiable. There is a term that's been used and reused is she wasn't under control. Well, control for the purposes of using force to keep somebody under control are part of the arrest procedure, not part of somebody throwing a tantrum in the street. If that's the case, you know, every kid that throws a tantrum in the grocery store, I guess, justifies use of force. But the fact of the matter is that unless you enter the circumference of danger that Christy Gammon arguably presented, you weren't in danger. The spitting doesn't justify use of force. I cannot, as chief, find a way in all the information that's presented to me to justify that behavior and use of force. So I recommend for the use of force component that she's violated law and that she's violated policy. The second part of this is the denial of medical treatment. The Bowling Green policy has an affirmative responsibility on the behalf of the arresting officer, which Danica Kay was. The policy demands that the arresting officer assure that medical treatment is given to their prisoner. She didn't do that. She wants to say, I forgot, I was distracted. It was her responsibility. It was her affirmative responsibility. She couldn't give it away to somebody else. The policy doesn't say if you decide not to exercise that responsibility, you can give it away to your officer who's controlling your prisoner. The policy doesn't say this policy only applies sometimes. The policy says the arresting officer has a responsibility if the person in custody needs treatment, that they assure that medical treatment is given to the prisoner. She did not. We have evidence presented in the case that the EMS personnel specifically say they spoke to Danica Kay at the scene. That Danica Kay said, nobody needs medical treatment here, you can leave. I don't know, that is obstructive. In my view as chief, looking at the facts of this case, that's obstructive behavior. When as the facts of the case as presented to me suggest that the prisoner is literally 5 or 6 feet away, being held by Officer Owen, sitting on the ground, being physically controlled. Officer Owen is holding her head still from behind where she should be so that she can't spit on anybody else. They're within 5 or 6 feet, according to Officer Owen. And yet, Danica Kay doesn't take the time while she's talking to the emergency medical staff to turn around and point to Christy Gammon sitting on the ground. This is why I called you. This lady right here needs medical treatment, which is absolutely normal protocol for the Bowling Green Police Department. If you call the ambulance to the scene, there's an expectation. The ambulance comes to the police to go, who'd you call for? You all called us, who'd you call for? And in this case, Danica has contact with the EMS staff, which are two members of EMS. They both speak to Danica. They both have the same statements delivered to me in the content of the investigation, who both say Danica Kay said, nobody here needs treatment, you can leave. Oh, by the way, I need something to get this spit off me. She did think to get herself cleaned up and got some antiseptic wipes from the EMTs, but she didn't think to turn around and point them to the prisoner who was sitting on the ground 5 feet behind her to get her medical treatment. I view that as obstructive. There is some that will say that taking her to jail and having the jail nurse look at her is equivalent to medical treatment. That then qualifies for meeting the standard that policy demands. The jail nurse is intended to do, I think, 2 things. One, provide minor medical care, much like a mother would do to a child, where if you need a Band-Aid, they'll give you a Band-Aid. If you need a dressing on your injury, they'll change the dressing. And they're also there to triage the incoming prisoners to protect the jail against liability. They're not there as a doctor and an emergency room staff to provide true medical care. The evidence in this case, presented to me in the investigation, suggests that there was never any clear communication between the police department staff and the jail staff as to what they thought the seriousness of Christy Gammon's medical condition was. I think there's been 5 or 6 things that have been presented in testimony today. We know she was injured. She had blood on her hand and she had blood on her shirt. We know that she claimed to be pregnant at the time of the incident. We know that she had been in a fight with Danica Kay during the arrest, which we suggest was righteous in this case, but we do know that there had been a fight. We know that she was intoxicated. That may have been on alcohol, that may have been on drugs. In even Danica Kay's statement, she suspects that all of these conditions exist. Add to that, there's the condition we've talked about, which is excited delirium. Excited delirium is a serious physiological state that virtually every police officer in the country is now aware of, more often than not induced by drug. Not always. I dealt with a gentleman that was excited delirium that was a reaction to a medical condition. But the fact of the matter is that most of the times and most of the cases we discuss in the information that we get, in the training that we get, there is drug-induced excited delirium. And it is a life-threatening situation. It obviously doesn't always result in death, but it can, and we know that. We're taught that. We're trained that. So to have Christy Gammon sitting at the scene that by Danica Kay's own statement suffers from all of these conditions, and it concerns her enough to call EMS, but then when EMS gets there, she doesn't then direct EMS to them, is baffling to me. It is such substandard performance that I can't accept it as being accidental. So I don't think the jail nurse is equivalent to medical treatment with respect to the conditions that we know existed or suspected existed with Christy Gammon at the scene at the time of the incident. Add to the fact that after EMS was called to the scene, Danica Kay engaged in some use of force, resulting in Christy Gammon getting hit in the head multiple times with a closed fist. That alone is enough to seek medical care. That alone. If you add to the list the other 5 or 6 things I've listed, it is more than compelling. And the expectation in every case would be that the officer assures that the EMTs see that patient on the scene. It's ridiculous not to. And to think that the jail nurse is equivalent to true medical care at the emergency room is ridiculous. I couldn't accept that and don't accept that as an explanation. The last is truthfulness. Truthfulness is one of the cornerstones of law enforcement. We have to expect our police officers to be honest and truthful in every circumstance. I'm sure it's going to be painted as being a small issue. But the fact of the matter is, it's not a small issue when a police officer articulates or documents something that is factually untrue. There's nothing in evidence to suggest that Christy Gammon affirmatively denied medical treatment. She wasn't given the opportunity, and it's our practice as a department that when EMTs are on scene, it's in this case, the prisoner's right to deny medical treatment to the medical staff, not to us. We don't intercede on their behalf to deny on their behalf. Christy Gammon should have been given the opportunity. If denial was factually what she wanted to do, she should have been given that opportunity to deny to the EMT staff. Fact is there was no denial. I think the evidence presented today suggests, and the evidence in the case suggests, Christy Gammon wasn't in her right mind. Mr. Simpson has said so. She was out of control. There was no reason for us to believe she was in the right state of mind to give a denial. We have a responsibility, frankly, and we have a responsibility to protect ourselves from liability, but we have a responsibility to protect the prisoner now in our care. And so when it was documented on the use of force report, both in the original completed by Danica Kay and also in the supplement submitted by Michelle Owen, that there was a refusal for medical treatment, that's implausible because medical staff never saw her on scene. And that's undeniable. There's nobody that says EMT staff spoke to Christy Gammon. They didn't. EMT staff says they didn't speak to Christy Gammon. They were sent away because nobody was in need of medical treatment. So the documentation to suggest that the medical treatment was denied, is that a mistake? I don't know. I know what the report says, and the report is infactual, and the report is infactual in light of all the other facts, and so I have to look at it as being untruthful in the documentation. So I came to a conclusion based on all of those facts that Danica Kay had acted inappropriately, that she had violated state law with respect to assault, that she had violated Bowling Green Police Department policy on multiple circumstances, and that ultimately I, as a police chief, have a responsibility to make sure this agency meets the needs and expectations of our community. I can't ignore the facts of this case. As I see them, as I interpret them, I cannot ignore them. I believe Danica Kay, in using force against Christy Gammon by hitting her in the head multiple times while she was laying on the ground handcuffed, was excessive, was inappropriate, that she intentionally intervened by not making sure that she got medical care, which is required by policy, and that ultimately she documented that Christy Gammon had refused medical treatment when she didn't. In combination with all of those actions, I had no choice, and I consulted with other staff. I didn't make this decision lightly. I didn't make this decision in a vacuum. I reviewed all of the facts closely and carefully and have re-reviewed them and have discussed them with other people and have come to the same conclusion over and over and over again that Danica Kay was wrong in what she did, both in the use of force and in the denial of medical treatment, as well as in her documentation. And the use of force alone, but certainly combined with the other things, is more than sufficient to recommend termination for those acts. Excessive force cannot be tolerated by this agency. I think our community would suggest that they don't tolerate excessive force by their police officers. And I hope nobody would tolerate a police officer using excessive force when it was not necessary. And so for that reason, I discussed with the city attorney, ultimately recommending to the mayor that charges be preferred and that those charges come at the cost of termination for Danica Kay.
I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Simpson?
So you're saying that as chief, you are completely and always have been intolerant of excessive use of force?
Yes.
That's not really true, though, is it, Chief?
It is true.
Did you become aware of an excessive use of force in late 2006 after you became chief?
You're going to have to be more specific.
Involving a car accident on Main Street?
I am aware of the incident you speak of, yes.
And there was clearly a use of force in that circumstance, was there not?
I think you would characterize it as a use of force, which you clearly are trying to do, but what in fact happened was...
I'm asking you if you would characterize it as a use of force.
I'm characterizing it as an accidental use of force while trying to do something else.
An accidental use of force.
Yes.
Let me write this down.
And I can elaborate if you'd like.
While trying to do something else. Correct?
That is correct.
And that use of force was never reported by the officer at all, was it?
No, I think we have access to the use of force reports that the officer submitted.
When was it reported in relationship to the incident? The incident was in August of 2006. You didn't become aware of it until sometime in November.
That is correct.
And so when was the use of force report filed?
You'd have to, I think we could produce it if need be, but I don't recall the exact date, but it was certainly after the event.
Okay. And that particular officer was not terminated, were they?
Well, in fact, there was a fairly significant error made by a supervisor involved in that case.
That wasn't my question. My question was that officer terminated for that incident?
If you want the answer to that, you're going to have to let me explain what the circumstances were that led to any disciplinary action on that officer.
Well, do you mind explaining the answer to the yes or no, and then I assume that you will elaborate?
Okay. The officer was not terminated.
Okay. The officer was only counseled, correct?
And retrained, if I understand.
You've been chief 8 years, correct?
That's right.
When was the last time you were on the street?
More than 8 years ago.
at least more than 8 years ago, right?
Mhm.
It's the last time you made an arrest.
I couldn't tell you.
When was the last time you actually worked as a patrol officer?
Your Honor, I've let this go on for a little while, but I object to irrelevance.
Your Honor, he gave about a 20-minute answer to a question a minute ago, and all of that presupposes that it presupposes a lot of things, that he is an expert and that he is in touch with the officers out on the street. And I think I have the right to ask him when the last time he actually worked as a patrol officer. Because things have changed in Bowling Green, unfortunately.
Well, Your Honor, just briefly.
This is cross-examination. He gave a 20-minute answer to a question a minute ago. And I sat here patiently.
You did.
Didn't
Thank
say a
you.
word.
I understand that, and I appreciate Mr. Simpson's patience, but that doesn't make the answer to his question relevant. It's not relevant. I mean, he's the chief of police. He's not out on the beat. We'll stipulate to that.
That's my whole point.
You know.
I beg your pardon?
Again, we're going to take more time arguing about it than just getting the answer, but that's my whole point.
Your point is what?
He has not been out on the street in a long time and dealt with some of the people that Sergeant K has been dealing with.
Is that an accurate statement, Doug, what he just said?
I haven't been on the street in a long time as an assigned police officer to a beat or a district. I have not.
10 or 15 years?
I was promoted to sergeant in late 2004, so the last time I served as a patrol officer was late 2004, but I've certainly been in patrol and done that type of work more recently than that.
It's been 10 years since you were out on patrol, correct?
Yes,
And you did not do this investigation yourself.
that's correct.
And I'm told that you are the last witness for the city and no one from EMS has testified, correct?
That's the decision of council.
Okay. And even from the EMS staff, they didn't specifically say that Sergeant K told them don't treat her or somehow got in the way of her getting treated while Danica K was out trying to figure out what was going on behind 1101 Payne Street, right?
If you're asking me if Danica K said don't treat her to the EMT staff, she didn't use those words. She simply just didn't direct them to her.
And every police officer knows that the jail has a medical unit, correct?
Correct?
Do you know this nurse that you're speaking of?
I don't.
So do you think that nurse, do you know if she's an RN?
I don't.
Do you know if she has more training than an EMT?
I don't.
So when you say that she doesn't replace people who are trained, when we're talking about ambulance personnel, correct? And with no offense to EMTs and paramedics, a nurse has had more training than they have.
Fair to say, but an EMT on scene does one of two things. They either get a refusal from the patient, from the prospective patient, or they transport them to the hospital and provide interim care until they get to the hospital and get to a doctor and a nursing staff. So to suggest that it's either EMTs or a nurse is not factual. It's either EMTs in the hospital or refusal or maybe the nurse at the jail.
All right, let's use our common sense here for a second, Chief. You think Christy Gammon was going to get in the back of an ambulance?
I don't have any idea what she was going to do.
Well, you saw the video of her in the back of the police car, right?
No, sir. I have seen it, but I didn't see it today, if that's
But
what
you've
you're
seen it
referring to.
before,
Yeah.
right? And you know that she had to be put in the restraint chair, correct?
She got in the back seat of a police car. I don't know of any reason why I would believe she wouldn't get into the ambulance.
Okay. So you think she would have gone with them?
I don't suppose what she would have done. I don't think she was ever given the opportunity.
And you're equating Christy Gammon walking up and down the street, high as a kite, as being a 5-year-old having a temper tantrum?
I think when she was in custody and laying on the ground, I think that's exactly what it was like. I think there's a distinct difference between what we expect and what she was capable of doing prior to being taken into custody and post-custody. And post-custody, laying on the ground in handcuffs, throwing a tantrum, I think that's a fair representation.
Would you agree with me that Christy Gammon was a wild card and really hard to determine what she was going to do next?
Which is one of the reasons handcuffs are appropriate, because it limits her mobility and limits her ability to do bad things.
Right, and Sergeant K had already had to ride her to the ground, right?
I didn't use those words.
Well, she did a modified straight arm takedown, landing this lady on her face, right?
And done properly, you don't ride them to the ground on her back. So
Well, but if they're fighting, that just happens sometimes, doesn't it?
certainly could. They're very dynamic situations when you have to wrestle somebody.
And as Sergeant Flesher said earlier, the use of force continuum can get quite complicated at times, depending really on what the arrestee does, right?
It's all dependent on what not the arrestee. In this, you're talking about a post-arrest situation. It changes the set of facts. If you have somebody in handcuffs in custody, it's a different set of facts with respect to force than pre-custody. So you can't equate the two. You can't say behavior before custody
is not predictive of what she might do in a few minutes.
If you're in custody, predictive is I guess relevant, because you can do very little laying on the ground handcuffed.
Well, you are aware from all of these reports that you read that Sergeant K was not able to double lock the handcuffs, right?
And the only thing that does is have the potential for the handcuffs to get tighter on the prisoner.
Right, because she had trouble getting the handcuffs on her.
But double locking is a preference, not a mandate. Once you get the handcuffs on, they're on.
Anybody ever slip out of handcuffs before?
If they were not put on tight enough.
Okay. So you think that Christy Gammon was a predictable entity that night, even after she was arrested?
I'm not suggesting she was predictable at all.
So you had the benefit of weeks of interviews conducted by someone else, and weeks and weeks and weeks of thought to come to this conclusion, right?
That is correct.
And Danica K had maybe 5 seconds. And your judgment is you think she should be terminated after you've thought about it for months, when she had to make perhaps a life or death decision right there at 11th and Payne that night.
You're supposing that being kicked near or being spit on is life or death?
I just asked the question. Do you want me to clarify it or ask it again?
I'd like you to ask it again. I don't think I understood it.
Whatever the circumstances Danica K was faced with, and you never actually interviewed Danica K, did you?
It's not my role in an internal investigation.
So the answer is no, you never talked to her.
I never did.
Okay. The circumstances she was faced with, only she knows, correct?
As reported or discovered in the fact. But
At
yes,
the-
she had
at the
every
moment
opportunity. She had every opportunity to tell us those facts. So
Let's go back to April 26th for a minute, the night this happened. She's the only one that knows what was going through her mind, what feelings were going on, her surroundings. Only she knows those things, correct?
I would agree with that.
All right. And
From her perspective.
from her perspective. And she is there in what she believes is a dangerous situation. You agree it's a dangerous situation?
I think it's volatile. I don't know that I would characterize it as dangerous. I think you would certainly like to characterize it as dangerous. A crowd in and of itself doesn't imply danger.
Okay. A crowd at 11th and Payne doesn't incite danger. When
Not
they're
implicitly.
When they're getting calls and it's going out over the radio, multiple subjects maybe have knives, that's not dangerous to you?
It's certainly potentially dangerous.
Okay.
As is every situation police deal with.
Okay. And she had to make a split-second decision as to what she did, and you had months to think about it.
Agreed.
Okay. And after all of your reflection, you think your judgment is more appropriate than hers was on that night?
The implication is nobody should be held accountable for what they make in a split-second decision. I disagree with that assessment, but yes.
I didn't say that. So do you think she should have tased her if she was possibly pregnant?
There were other options.
So the answer is no, she shouldn't have tased her.
The use of taser against a pregnant woman is not strictly denied, it is discouraged.
Okay, so you agree that she should not have tased her, correct?
I would agree it may not have been the best choice.
You don't have a problem with her not tasing her that night?
I don't have a problem with her not tasing her.
And knowing that she had communicable diseases, you said that she didn't know that. She knew that she had a communicable disease.
I think testimony here today suggests that she didn't know that she knew that she had a quote-unquote 1060, which may, as Major Bowles suggested, may even be lice, bed bugs, or some other condition. So we don't know that it's a communicable disease. So it's a jump to suggest that anybody at that point knew she had a communicable disease.
What is the code that's used for communicable disease?
1060 is a generic code for universal precautions because there is some potential infectious situation.
Okay. And you use universal precautions because you don't know if it's lice or AIDS.
You don't know, yeah.
So it's not unreasonable for a police officer to assume the worst.
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
It's not unreasonable for a police officer to assume that it could be AIDS.
I don't know whether it's reasonable or unreasonable. It's appropriate to weigh all the information that you have in any circumstance.
So if you don't know, you're saying it's unreasonable to assume the worst?
Are you talking about in this case specifically? Should
Talking
I
about
accept
in every case. If I'm a police officer and I'm on a call and I know that somebody is 1060 and I don't know what it is, it's not unreasonable for me to assume that it might be AIDS.
I think that's certainly one of the possibilities.
Okay. And so Sergeant Flesher testified earlier that if someone is hepatitis C positive and they spit on you, that is an assault. You disagree with that?
I think that's a legal opinion that should be made by a prosecutor, a police officer. We're not trained that being spit on by hepatitis C is an assault. So I would suggest that was his opinion, not some bona fide fact.
So you disagree with it?
I'm saying I don't know of any case where anybody's been charged with or prosecuted for spitting on somebody.
Okay. When did EMS leave the scene?
Only, according to the documents that I have been made aware of, they were on scene just a short time.
What time did they leave?
I don't know what time.
What time did Officer K leave?
You would have to refer to the CAD notes or the investigative notes.
You don't know?
I don't know specifically.
Okay. You don't know if EMS left before she was put into the police car even?
I do know that they left before that because Officer Owen reported that she had control of Christy Gammon on the scene until medical staff left, and then she put her in her car and transported her.
So based upon Officer Owen's report, you believe that EMS left before or after she was placed in the car?
According to Officer Owen, which is the information I have available to me, the EMT staff were on scene. While they were speaking to Danica Kay, Officer Owen had her in physical control, sitting about 5 or 6 feet away. Once the EMTs were sent away, they left the area, they left the scene.
Who
then
sent them away?
Officer Owen.
Who sent them away?
Well, according to EMT staff, that was their information was available in the investigation. Danica Kay sent them away.
Tell me where that is in the materials, Chief.
It's in the investigative file provided to you.
I've yet to see that one of them say Danica Kay told us to leave.
It's in the It's been entered into testimony here. I think Major Bowles.
Who said that?
I think Major Bowles said that.
Major Bowles said what now?
She said that she said that the EMT staff that she interviewed both said that Danica Kay had told them nobody here needs medical treatment. You can leave. And their
Are you referring to EMT Puckett?
Their statements are the investigative file that we've provided you.
Are you referring to EMT Puckett?
If that's his name, I don't recall his name.
Puckett advised Danica Kay approached them and advised them nobody was injured. Puckett advised he noticed a large amount of snot/spit on Kay's uniform. Puckett asked if she was okay, to which Kay informed him that she had been spat on. Puckett advised he immediately retrieved cavicide wipes for Kay to clean her uniform and gave her a spit hood for the detainee. You with me so far?
I'm with you so far.
So Danica Kay didn't go over and say, "Can I have a wipe?" They brought it to her, right?
I don't know that that captures the detail of their conversation. Those are summaries.
Well, but they're not here to testify. And
Agreed.
You're quoting from their summary, so I'm going to quote from it.
I'm quoting from the information provided to me that resulted in my conclusion,
Which was this report, correct?
which was the entire case file which we have provided.
Which
to you.
includes this report.
Yes.
Puckett advised they waited on scene a little longer and the crowd dispersed. Puckett advised he again asked Kay if she was fine, and she said she was, and again that nobody was injured. Puckett advised the detainee was still sitting in the roadway being consoled by her mother, still screaming and acting oddly. Puckett advised they hung out a little longer to make sure nothing else happened, and they cleared the scene.
And you just read the statement where they said, and nobody was injured.
I still am not reading that Sergeant Kay told them to leave, but you're trying to suggest that to the city commission.
She told them nobody was injured.
But she didn't tell them to leave, did she, Chief?
That's the information provided to me, that she did, in fact, tell them they could leave.
Tell me where you got that. Did Major Bowles just divine that out of this report that I just read?
You may have to refer to their audio interviews that...
Well, we're here for the hearing today, Chief, and...
You asked me where it is. I can't specifically point to you where in that investigation it is, but it's my belief that that information is there.
Okay. You don't have a problem with her not using OC spray either, do you?
As a tool, we provide it, so I would expect there are occasions when it would be appropriate to use.
On the night that this occurred, do you have a problem with her not using OC spray?
It is a tool available to them if they deem it appropriate to use. They certainly have the ability to use it. I wasn't there to determine for her. She made that determination on her own.
But you're here to determine today that she did everything else wrong. But are you telling the city commission you don't have an opinion about that?
Whether or not to use OC, I don't. That's completely up to the officer based on the facts that they're
presented
faced
with at that time.
That's right.
I see. Your Honor, I would like to play a videotape at this point, given the fact that the chief has said that at all times he detests and cannot condone the excessive use of force, yet I believe this videotape will show that he has really let it slide in at least one occasion.
This is a use of force issue that you're bringing up?
It is very much a use of force
How do you
issue.
plan for us to see it?
I will plug this in a better place where you can actually see it this time.
Okay, how long will it take you to get it set up?
It won't take but a second, but we may want to take a 5 or 10 minute break so that we're not falling all over ourselves.
While you're doing
And I'll be
that.
glad to set it up there. I think the chief has probably seen it.
So it won't be on the screen?
If we can put it on there, that'll be fine, and Katie and I maybe can make that happen.
Your Honor, if I may, this gets into my written motion that I filed prior to the hearing regarding other acts, alleged acts of other officers, other alleged acts of misconduct, which is not before the court at this time. It doesn't bear on the issue that is before this tribunal at this juncture, which is whether this incident violated the law and the policy. And, when we had, I believe it was Major Bowles up here, counsel wanted to play an interview or wanted to show some video while she was testifying, and did show video of the Christy Gammon in the back of the squad car and everything, but he didn't ask her any questions about it or anything. And I mean, it's one thing if you want to show a witness a video and then ask them questions about it, but I don't think it just, anytime you're on cross-examination, you can just play whatever video that you want.
I'm not just playing whatever video, Your Honor. What I'm doing here is that
Excuse me, I wasn't finished. So, my written objection, which I filed before the hearing, has to do with the relevance of other alleged acts at other times of other officers, which doesn't have anything to do with this. That's my first objection to getting into this issue. And the second is, you know, if he wants to ask him questions about it, he can, but I don't think it's just a opportunity just because you have somebody on cross-examination that you can just play a video about another alleged act of misconduct at another time that doesn't have anything to do with this issue. So that's my objection. Now I'm finished. Thank you.
Mayor, I didn't plan on this coming up right now, but when the chief said, I don't tolerate this under any set of circumstances, and that's why I recommended her dismissal, it is incumbent upon me to show you this video because he has condoned it. And I think you will be shocked at what you see.
I was going to say, while you're setting it up, Mr. Harmon and I will confer, and I'll
Understand.
roll
And if, you know, they talk about opening the door. They opened the door. And I will set it up, but if Your Honor doesn't allow me to play it, I still want to put it into the record for purposes of an appeal. If you find Sergeant K guilty of anything and we choose to appeal it to circuit court, I want the circuit judge, I have an obligation to put this into the record one way or another, but I will assure you that it is completely contradictory, and I think it goes, you know, and sometimes it's tough living in this community doing what I do, but I think it goes directly to the chief's credibility about what he said, about he never tolerates things like this. And what you will see will blow your mind.
Well, if he wants to ask him about the incident...
I did, and he said it was an accident. I want him to see the incident.
He said he's seen it already, so...
Well, he's seen it, but they haven't seen
Again,
it. If this is an accident, wow.
Okay. Well, I've heard. We're going to talk about it here.
Okay.
And let you know in just a few minutes.
5 minutes?